Okay. Well, why don't we get started? It looks like we have a lot of people who want to say something today, and so I'll try to get you through this as quickly as I can. I'm sure you have other things you want to do today as well. I'm Phil Albrechts. I'm the hearing examiner for Mason County. Been doing this a long time, since the 1990s. I will say I think this is probably the biggest crowd we've gotten in a hearing since the motorsports racetrack that was put together. Back then, I think we had like 100 men and 2 women or something. I don't know why. It seems to be more of a gender-specific sport, possibly. But anyway, it looks like we have a really good mix today. And I don't usually impose time limits. You know, I want to give people a chance to talk, but at the same time, so that everyone has a chance to talk, I'm going to be a little mindful of the clock. So if you're getting past 5 minutes, I'm probably going to ask that you wrap it up just so that other people can talk today. I mean, I think if everyone here wants to say something today, it's going to be a while. And one kind of misconception I want to address here, and I think most of you understand kind of how this works. They call this quasi-judicial proceeding. It's more like a courtroom than it is when you're addressing your county commissioners or something like that. And you know, if you were to go to a murder trial, you wouldn't tell the judge, I vote that this person be convicted. It's not a democratic process. It's a legal one. And that's the same one that we have here today. Because I saw a lot of comments like, I vote against this project. That's not what matters for the courts or what legally matters for me. What matters is whether or not this meets the criteria in the code. And I think the good news is that the code for shoreline permits is really detailed. It covers just about every impact you can think of, not property values specifically, maybe that's the one that's out there, but everything that affects property values is in there, namely aesthetics and the fact that you moved into your property because you wanted to have that rural atmosphere and you didn't want to have to look at it, a commercial project in your backyard or industrial, if you want to call it that. Those are all pertinent. So just about anything you're concerned about really is something that is relevant to whether or not this project should be approved. And but that, as your appointed hearing examiner, my job is just to make sure that the law is followed. If it looks like that I'm basing my decision on political pressure on the number of people in the room, then that goes to court, and the court will overturn it, and then the court will give a bunch of money to Taylor Shellfish and make us do it all over again. So it's kind of pointless to base it on the number of people in the room or the number of votes. It has to be based on, is this compatible with the environment? Is it compatible with what you're doing there and living there and that kind of stuff, and that's what I look at. I've spent hours reading over your comments, and I write very thorough decisions. I'll be addressing all of your concerns in my final decision. That's going to be due in a couple weeks if we get done with everything today. And I will say, if you want to get a copy of that decision, I think that county staff would prefer to email it as opposed to having to send, a paper copy to everybody. So if staff doesn't already have your email address, you should send your email address to Mariah Frazier there. And Mariah, what's your email address so people know?
mfrazier@masoncountywa.gov.
Yeah, FARAZIER, and then after the hearing you can go and if you didn't get that, and get her email address, that kind of stuff. If you do absolutely need a paper copy, the staff does have to send you one, so just let Mariah know you want a paper copy and make sure that you give her your address. But as it stands now, we do have a sign-in sheet with addresses, but I think the way we're going to at least try to do this is we're just going to send it to all the email addresses that have been provided, unless somebody specifically says, I want it sent to a mailed address, and let Mariah know after the hearing, or give her a call in the next couple days over at Community Development and let her know you want a hard copy, and she'll take care of that, right, Mariah? Okay, all right. So,
Excuse me, sir.
Oh, yeah.
I did not catch your name.
Oh, Phil Albrechts?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure, yeah. And it'll be on my written decision and all that kind of stuff, yeah. So, all right, so the hearing format is, we're going to start off with the staff presentation. If Ms. Viscuzzi is going to give us an overview of the project. I don't know if you've all had a chance to read a staff report. I know from your letters, a lot of you did. It's, compared to other types of projects, these shoreline permits, it do involve a lot of analysis, a lot of scientific review, that kind of stuff, and this is one of the most thorough reports I've seen, on this kind of project. I mean, Mr. Viscuzzi has covered, I think, everything, which kind of opens him up to more questions from me, but that's a good thing, obviously. Once he's done presenting his case, then we move on to the applicant comments. They get to speak in favor of their project. And once they're done, then we move on to the public comments. And in terms of, why does the applicant and staff get to talk for 10 or 15 minutes and everyone else just 5? It's kind of because it's the public, versus the applicant kind of situation. You have to kind of give both sides equal time on that. Once we're all done with public comments, like I said, hopefully you keep your comments under 5. You don't need, if you know, and I would encourage you, you know, if it's already been said, just say I agree with everything that so and so had said. You know, that way we can, like I said, get you all through this today, so you don't have to sit here for 4 hours listening to the same thing over and over again. And like I said, if you wrote something down, you can just say, you know, I just go by what I wrote, and you know, I want you to pay attention to that kind of thing. That's fine too. But once we're done with public comments, go back to Mr. Viscusi to answer questions. Applicant gets final word. I get that 10 business days, which is a couple weeks to issue a decision, and that decision then is appealable to the Shoreline Hearings Board, which is a board down in Olympia, or I guess from here up in Olympia, that deals with shoreline appeals. So. Now, by state law, I'm only allowed to consider evidence that's put into the record. That way you all know exactly what information is being considered. I don't get to talk to Taylor, Shellfish, or even staff about this project outside of the hearing, because I might base my decision then on information you don't know about and didn't have a chance to respond to. So the information I did get ahead of the hearing, of course, was Mr. Viscusi's staff report, and he had 30 exhibits on that. It's on the city's website. You know, included his staff report. We got the shoreline permit application. We got the eelgrass study, the habitat management plan. We have the visual analysis. You know, there's a lot of information that goes on in there. Does anyone need to see any of these documents that didn't have a chance to see them or object to their entry in the record at this point? Yeah, usually that's not something people have a problem with, so I'll go ahead and admit the staff report and exhibits 1 through 30. And I will say now, Ms. Rowan, have all public comments been posted on the city's website? Is that available there?
County.
From the date prior to the staff report, all public comments are posted. Since the staff report was sent to you on July 31st, all public comments were sent to Mariah and then sent to you. As well as
Okay.
the applicant.
Can I ask that you put them all on the city's website there? And then, because, okay, so what I'll tell you is if you submitted a written comment, then a couple days from now, you know, if you want to make sure that we got it, you know, go ahead and look up the city's website just to see if your comment's there. I mean, it's very rare that staff does, you know, forgets to, or you know, omits to get a specific letter in there, but just to be doubly sure, you know, and if you want to really make sure that your written comment got in the record, take a look at the city's website, make sure it's there. If it's not there, you know, contact Mariah. And then, you know, if you can show that you gave it to us before this hearing was closed, we'll make sure that's part of the record and something that's considered for the final decision. So with that, Mr. Viscusi, let me swear you in. Just raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm to tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Told it's probably best that I go with podium.
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Hearing Examiner, staff report, which is Exhibit 1, introduces a shoreline substantial development permit for installing a subtidal floating oyster bag system to grow Pacific oysters in Oakland Bay. The applicant is Taylor Shellfish, represented by Aaron Ewald of Taylor Shellfish. The project is located within Oakland Bay of the South Puget Sound and is in a subtidal area of the bay. This means the area of the project is always covered by water and the project is always floating. The project is sited 1,000 feet from all adjacent shorelines, so no shellfish will be cultivated from any beaches. Sorry about that. Notably, the site is designated as a shoreline of statewide significance by Mason County Code 17.50.070B1B as a saltwater body below the line of extreme low tide. Thus, the use preference hierarchy of Mason County Code 17.50.070B2 applies in review of this project. The project boundaries are defined by the Washington Department of Natural Resources Lease Application 20-104436, which is Exhibit 13. The boundaries stretch across Mesa County Parcel 32010-13-70590, Parcel 32015-22-22222, and Parcel 32016-22-22222. All three parcels are owned by the Washington DNR. Boundaries and location for the project are most easily seen in Exhibits 9, 23, 28, and 29. To clarify, To clarify, there are public comments that state the project is receiving a 99-year lease. The lease application to the Washington DNR specifies a 10-year lease. I have not seen any valid documentation that states the project would receive anything other than a 10-year lease, so I will let the applicant confirm the lease timeframe during their portion of the hearing. Also, to clarify some language in my staff report, when I refer to the DNR lease for the project, please know that it is currently an application to lease. The DNR has not leased the project area to the applicant yet because the lease is dependent upon receiving permits from all of the other necessary government entities. All oyster aquaculture is broken up into two categories within Mason County Code, which are floating and non-floating. The project classification section of the Mason County Shoreline Master Program, which is Mason County Code 17.50.090, requires a shoreline substantial development permit or shoreline exemption permit for new floating aquaculture projects in aquatic shoreline designations. This project is not exempt from the substantial development requirements and therefore requires a shoreline substantial development permit. The term conditional use permit appears on many of the exhibits for this project, but is no longer applicable. I incorrectly believed a shoreline conditional use permit was necessary for much of the review period. However, as I said, Mason County Code 17.50.090 permits floating aquaculture in aquatic shoreline designations with a shoreline substantial development permit, so no conditional use permit is required. Since a conditional use permit is not required, the Washington Department of Ecology will not make a decision on this permit. For shoreline substantial development permits, Mason County Hearings Examiner makes the final decision. This is because shoreline substantial development permits are Type 3 permits in Mason County. Type 3 permits, as you said, are not reviewed by the county commissioners, there is no vote of any kind, and the permits are instead reviewed by the Hearings Examiner. At full installation, an estimated 9.1 acres of surface water within a 50-acre project boundary would be used for floating aquaculture gear. Public access is defined in Mason County Code 17.50.020 as the ability of the general public, or in some cases a specific community, to reach, touch, and enjoy the water's edge, to travel on waters of the state, and to view the water and the shoreline from adjacent locations. The project renders 9.1 acres of state waters inaccessible due to the location of aquaculture gear and must therefore provide public access to the extent allowed by law. As mitigation for the acreage made inaccessible by the aquaculture gear, the applicant has proposed to formally grant the public the right of access to 16.6 acres of tidelands and work with Oakland Bay Marina to provide assistance for improvements to their boat launch and/or related facilities. This is detailed in the Public Access Memorandum, which is Exhibit 23. A SEPA determination of non-significance was issued on April 19th, 2023 for the project. And in closing, staff recommends approval of the permit with conditions given that the permit meets the necessary criteria. I'll let the applicant explain their project more.
Okay, just some quick questions. These are, I apologize to the audience, a little technical, but I just get some clarification when I have to go back and review all this. Mr. Briscoe, in a few points in your staff report, you kind of say that unsubmerged tidelines aren't subject to the public trust doctrine. I mean, about 2 or 3 years ago, I had the Edmond City Attorney argue up and down that they are subject to public trust and the public already has a right to access to unsubmerged lands. I mean, where did you come up with that conclusion? I know there's an unpublished court opinion that says they're not subject to the trust lands.
Are you asking for a specific
well,
answer?
I just wonder how you, because you wrote that several times, I'm
So
just wondering how you came to that idea because the reason why that's a concern is if the public already has a right of access to Taylor Shellfish unsubmerged tidelands, then they're really not giving anything by saying you can access those properties.
I guess my answer is I can't make that determination. If you feel that is worded incorrectly, I'm gonna defer to the legal.
That was county policy or something like that, or yeah.
No,
so,
no.
Okay.
For this case, and I think in Mason County Code, I can't ever determine that the project is in violation of the public trust doctrine, nor does Mason County Code look at that. It looks at if it impacts waters subject to the doctrine, and that it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah.
if you feel that legally that was incorrect, I would totally understand.
Yeah, I was like I said, I was just a little curious where that came from. And then in terms of the Bush Act property, the fallback property, if the tribe wants to go and fish there, you made a comment that oysters are non-native. Is that correct, or was that a typo in there?
Certain oysters are non-native. I would probably have to defer to shellfish experts as to which are non-native and which aren't. I do know there's part of the code that it doesn't necessarily call for native oysters, but oysters that were introduced into Washington tidelands prior to a certain year.
Okay.
I can't tell you what year that is. I could tell you that it's 17.50.210B.
All right, well, that's
1
fine. Yeah,
D.
I can look that up myself. Yeah, the reason that I was asking about that is you were referring to provisions about the Bush Act property, I'll call it the fallback property. And you came to the conclusion, therefore, that in that area they could basically go ongoing maintenance, harvest, replanting, restocking, or changing the culture technique or species. And the way I read the exceptions to what you can do on the Bush Act properties is that as long as you were sticking to native species, it was okay. But if you changed it to non-native, that's when you might have to get a shoreline permit after all. And so I don't know, I seem to have read that differently than you did. Are you really claiming that they can change the species? They can go from oysters to gooey ducks there or something? And
I'd have to look back at this was on
page 26.
All right. Let's see.
That's okay if you don't remember. Okay, yeah.
No, I
Like I said, I was going
cannot
to be a
say I
little
do.
technical because the big issue is, like I said, I think you've put everything on paper that can be put on paper on this. So, where are the nearest residences though to this area?
That would be about 1,000 feet to the south east.
Are these residences on bluffs? And I didn't disclose, by the way, I did drive all the way to Sunset Beach today just so I could get a look around all of the harbor there. So, all right. So anyway.
There's partial bluff. The banks are, I'd say where the houses are, they're between 50 to 70 feet above the water.
Okay.
There's a picture of it right there.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. And okay, I think that's all I got for now. So anyway, all right. Thank you, Mr. Viscusi. Let's move on to applicants. Do you want to add anything at this point?
Yes, we would,
Okay.
Your Honor. And my name is Jesse Denike. I'm legal counsel for Taylor Shellfish.
Okay.
I'm going to provide some brief opening remarks, and then we're going to call
Okay.
three
All right.
witnesses in support of the applicant.
All right. And since Mr. Denike's an attorney, I don't get to swear him in. So anyway, go ahead.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Can we open the door back there? For
Back
some
there.
air? Door
Oh, for some air?
air.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Denike.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. And Taylor Shellfish greatly appreciates the county's extensive review of this project. As you've mentioned, Mr. Viscusi's gone through extensive length reviewing comments, working through the code sections, so done a very good and commendable job doing that. And we greatly appreciate examiner's consideration of it. We agree with county staff's recommendation that the project's permit application should be approved. We also reviewed the proposed conditions of approval. For almost all of them, we believe that they're perfectly appropriate exactly as written. We do have some minor proposed revisions to 3 conditions. We set those forth in a letter dated yesterday. I believe that has been provided to the examiner. You all can speak to these also if you have any questions with respect to them. But our proposed revisions continue to advance the underlying interests that are sought to be protected by the conditions, but also make sure that they are feasible and consistent with the county's SMP. Taylor Shellfish has submitted extensive information in support of the permit application. We will largely rely on that written information to the examiner in support of the permit application. But like I also mentioned, we do have 3 witnesses that we will be providing to also provide supporting testimony. One of them is seated next to me, Ms. Erin Ewald. She's the Director of Regulatory Affairs for Taylor Shellfish. She took the lead on navigating the permitting process for this permit application. She'll discuss the need and purpose of this farm, go over details of the operations, and work through a number of issues, including compliance with the SMA and SMP, issues that have been raised during the permit process, including aesthetics, public access. Will be available to answer any questions the examiner may have for her on that. We will also call Anna Andres. Ms. Andres is the lead of the company's Near Bottom Oyster Farm that is within Chapman Cove, which is also located in Oakland Bay to the east of the proposed project location. Ms. Andres will discuss the company's existing farming operations, current extent and frequency of activities that are occurring in the bay, relationship of those activities to current operations, and anticipated interactions with proposed farm. Our third witness will be Mr. Chris Chiesla. Mr. Chiesla holds a master's in marine biology and is the senior principal marine and fisheries biologist and CEO of Confluence Environmental Company. Mr. Chiesla has extensive experience evaluating shellfish aquaculture in a number of different situations and projects, and he will provide testimony with respect to the project's anticipated environmental impacts. As the written record and testimony will demonstrate, we strongly believe this project satisfies all permit issuance criteria. Taylor's avoided, minimized, and offset all impacts of concern, including with respect to the natural and built environment, including aesthetics and public access. Several comments have been submitted in support of the permit application in light of the numerous environmental and economic benefits it provides. Taylor Shellfish is also aware that many comments have been submitted in opposition to the project, and even will continue to oppose the project, notwithstanding the different offsets and avoidance and minimization measures that Taylor provided. The fact that there will continue to be opposition is not terribly surprising. This project, like many shoreline projects, occurs out in an area that many people see and many people may use from time to time. So there's an inherent in shoreline planning that there will be a tension in claims for different visions and competing policies and preferences for shoreline activities. The legislature, in enacting the Shoreline Management Act, expressly envisioned that, and they planned for that. And they planned for that in part by identifying a number of uses that receive preferred status. Those projects include projects like this one that are water dependent. The Department of Ecology in Mason County also envisioned that tension, consistent with the Shoreline Management Act, developed implementing regulations, and developed the Shoreline Master Program for Mason County, which also identifies shellfish preferred use of statewide interests that can protect the resources and ecology of the shoreline. Going through the shoreline permitting process, the county Department of Ecology specifically considered the types of appropriate uses in all areas of Mason County. And for this area, they identified floating aquaculture as an appropriate use that can be permitted pursuant to a shoreline substantial development permit. Therefore, the examiner need not resolve these competing claims over appropriate uses of this area. The legislature, the Department of Ecology, and Mason County have already done that in identifying floating shellfish aquaculture as an appropriate permitted use. The question before the examiner is whether Taylor Shellfish has taken appropriate measures to avoid and minimize and offset those impacts to the extent required by the Shoreline Master Program. As we believe the written evidence and testimony that will be provided to you very clearly demonstrates, they've taken those actions. They've gone to extensive lengths to consider, respond to public comments, and provide appropriate avoidance, minimization, and offsetting measures. And with that, we will respectfully request that the examiner issue the Shoreline Substantial Development Permit with the proposed conditions, along with a few slight modifications that we've set forth in writing.
Okay, and I don't think your letter actually hasn't been put into the record yet, so I'm assuming you want to get that in the record.
We would. Has the examiner received it?
Yes, I received it. I'd marked that as Exhibit 31, I guess, I guess that hasn't been posted on the city or county website yet. Is that right? Yeah. I mean, from what I recall, it basically addressed the access requirements, and I didn't see it as really changing what you were proposing, but kind of clarifying what it was, I think. I mean, could you kind of summarize what your request was for the audience?
Yeah, so let me go ahead and pull up, I have a hard copy of the letter myself. So there were 3 conditions that we recommended slight modifications to. One was with respect to condition 1 that addressed public access, and there was some language in there with respect to public access being provided and available for public use. And there was potential for confusion with that, certainly with respect to the 16.6 acres that Taylor's making of his own titles, that Taylor's making available for public use. Yes, absolutely, make those available for public access. As Mr. Viscusi mentioned earlier, Taylor also committed to working with the marina due to upgrades to their facility. That facility is already open and available for public access, and so from that perspective, that has already been achieved, but to the extent that there's some potential confusion with respect to the timing of those improvements and this project, we don't want there to be any confusion that those improvements that are being proposed by somebody else need to be actually implemented. Taylor has no control over that. What we can do and what we are committing to is to working with them to identify support that we can provide for them. So it's just providing that clarification with respect to that item. The second condition is condition number 9 with respect to work hours. As Ms. Ewald will discuss, one of the real benefits of this type of cultivation system is that it allows the company to really focus its cultivation activities to daylight hours. And that provides a number of different benefits, both for the company as well as to residential users nearby. There won't be as many operations at nighttime. We are just requesting some flexibility around those hours during times of the year when there's relatively fewer daylight hours. Essentially an hour before and after dusk and dawn during certain parts of the year to make sure that they can get a full work day in. And also to allow for emergency, if there's ever a need for emergency responses during nighttime, that they have that ability to do that. Then with respect to the third item, again, it's a clarification with respect to debris management and responses around that, making sure, I think there's a way that condition could be interpreted so that any type of gear that may escape would result in a automatic determination that the farm is in violation of permit conditions. Taylor does not anticipate that occurring, but like I said in the letter, with any project, with any type of shoreline activity, there's always the potential for that, and having that automatically result in a permit violation is an overly harsh result. Taylor is willing to commit to taking very quick response actions, and they've committed to a number of other measures to make sure that they're appropriately maintaining gear. They just want to make sure that this condition is feasible and it's not going to be.
Do you have extra copies of that?
I do.
Okay, so if anyone needs to see their request for revisions,
I have 3 copies of that.
okay, all right. So yeah, I think we'll just pass one around if anybody needs to look at it. But any objections over that coming in the record? I mean, if you disagree with what they want, you can talk about that when you have your turn to speak. But any objections over its entry for consideration, though? Okay, here, and then I'll admit that as Exhibit 31 then.
Okay, excellent.
All right. And let me also just elaborate a little bit on, because I'm supposed to disclose when I do a site visit, and just to provide a little more detail. This morning before the hearing, I drove up 3 and then across the gate road, and then up Sunset Park, and looked at the homes and things along the way. Of course, the bay. So I've got a pretty good idea of the setting in which a lot of you live, and the beautiful homes that are out there, and that kind of thing. So, all right, with that, we'll move back to the applicants.
Okay, thank you. So first we'll call Ms. Erin Ewald.
Okay.
And before she starts presenting, I will note that both her as well as Mr. Cheesla have PowerPoint presentations that they were hoping to use. We need to go over admitting those now or after
When they're done, yeah, that'd be better.
And then just a housekeeping item, so I know it's hot in here, I think I feel some coolness, but we can't open the doors because of the feedback loop from the TV, and then that has staff working, and so if people need to leave, you can go out and reserve your seat from that
Shoot.
time, so.
Okay, all right, thanks for that. Let me swear you in. You swear affirm to tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay, good.
All right.
Okay, Ms. Ewald, go ahead and introduce yourself to the examiner and everybody in the room, and if we could have that presentation pulled up.
And Ms. Ewald, you can spell your last name for the record as well.
You bet.
That'd be helpful,
It's,
thank you.
Erin, E-R-I-N, Ewald, E-W-A-L-D. All right. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Erin Ewald. I'm Director of Regulatory Affairs with Taylor Shellfish, and I will be presenting on the Oakland Bay Floating Bag Project. Next slide. Taylor has applied for a lease with Washington DNR for the proposed farm. The lease area is 50 acres, At full build-out, expected in 2 to 3 years, the surface area footprint will be 9.1 acres. This includes approximately 30,000 containers, integrated floats, lines, and anchor buoys. The double lines are positioned approximately 30 feet apart to allow boat access for maintenance. The system is designed to flex with the current, but not to extend beyond the lease boundary. To accomplish this with the current configuration, up to 20 concrete wedge anchors and 30 screw anchors will be installed. Once installed, the anchors will remain stationary. If Taylor no longer leases the area, the floating system and anchors will be removed. Oakland Bay is historically and currently a mixed-use area, including port operations, commercial timber holds, aquaculture farms and their supporting infrastructure, conservation lands, upland farms, and residential. Taylor Shellfish has been farming in Oakland Bay since the late 1960s, and its operations currently include on-bottom clam and oyster, near-bottom bags for oyster, and a floating upwell system for seed nursery. Next slide. The system will be situated 1,000 to 1,500 feet from the shoreline at minimum. Again, the lease footprint is 50 acres. However, the surface area footprint is approximately 9.1 acres with an actual production area of 4.25 acres. Full build-out, again, is expected to take 2 to 3 years with 30,000 bags distributed along 30 double lines. Normal operations for this farm are not tide dependent and for safety would be conducted primarily during daylight hours. We are hoping to extend 1 hour beyond dawn or dusk in the winter in order to fully utilize those daylight hours. Nighttime operations are not expected but should be available for emergency work. Next slide. Current aquaculture farms are seed limited. The ability to grow and hold a larger variety and life stage of oysters within approved growing areas is paramount to the future of the industry as growers work to cultivate oysters in a changing environment, evolving markets, and increased regulations. The floating bags would improve oyster survivability from the nearby Flupsee. Expanded surface area provides the oysters with more consistent food and space to grow. Time in the bags would vary between a few weeks to 2 years. The system is expected to be used for holding and maturing seed. However, depending on hatchery success, available bags may be used to grow out oysters to market size. Increasing the ability to grow, store, and diversify the seed available for outplanting is critical to the future of aquaculture in Mason County. Taylor cultivates seed for its own farms, but also sells to other growers in the state, out of state, and in other countries. As we learned during the pandemic, residential landowners with either their own tidelands or access to community gardens began or expanded recreational shellfish farms for increased food security for their families and local communities. The floating bag system would be directly managed by a dedicated crew of 3 to 5 full-time positions. This floating farm would then support and stabilize Taylor's other farming operations, which include over 500 employees with a direct payroll of over 20 million, 22 numbers out of its Shelton campus. Next slide, please. This project is consistent with the Mason County Community Plan. Aquaculture remains the 5th largest employer in Mason County, providing full-time jobs, livable wages, and benefits. Aquaculture is a source of high-quality protein, has been a commercial practice here in Mason County for over 130 years, and is a water-dependent use which relies on excellent water quality. Next slide, please. It is the policy of the Shoreline Management Act to plan for and foster all reasonable and appropriate uses. Shellfish aquaculture is not simply an allowed use under the SMA, but it is a preferred water-dependent use. Implementing state regulations promulgated by the Department of Ecology further recognizes aquaculture as an activity of statewide interest that can result in long-term over short-term benefit and can protect the resources and ecology of the shoreline. They also classify all shellfish beds, including commercial, as critical saltwater habitats that require a higher level of protection due to the important ecological functions they provide. The Mason County SMP reiterates the use of preferences for aquaculture found in state law, and it further encourages aquaculture because this activity strengthens and diversifies the local economy. Next slide, please. Floating aquaculture is a permitted use in the SMP, and the SMP contains various policies and regulations addressing this use. As set forth in the staff report and our application materials, including the consistency analysis, this project is consistent with the aquaculture policies and regulations. I won't repeat all of the information contained in those materials, but I did want to highlight some of the key measures that Taylor will follow for this farm. Taylor will fully comply with the recent programmatic Endangered Species Act and Shellfish habitat consultation for shellfish aquaculture activities in Washington State. This programmatic consultation comprehensively analyzed shellfish farming interactions with all ESA-listed species, critical habitat, and essential fish habitat in Washington. The expert resource agencies identified approximately 30 conditions for shellfish farms to follow to effectively avoid and minimize impacts on species and habitat. The project will fully comply with these conditions, which address all potential mechanisms of impact to species and habitat, including water quality, submerged aquatic vegetation interactions, species use, and ensuring gear is appropriately used and managed. There are 19 conditions that the county staff have recommended for this project, and aside from the slight clarifying edits that Taylor requested in our August 8th letter, Taylor is comfortable with those conditions and prepared to fully comply. Taylor will also fully comply with the best management practices that have been developed specifically to reduce potential impacts to the environment and other shoreline users. These include trainings on nighttime operations, invasive species, marine mammals, migratory birds, debris patrols, and vessel maintenance, to name a few. Next slide, please. The system has multiple benefits for aquaculture production. As mentioned previously, it will stabilize production and help meet seed demands. Taylor has a long history of supporting improvements in water quality and environmental sustainability, and this system will complement ongoing efforts to mitigate the impacts of nutrients in the water due to development and land use. The system is designed for the ability to be disconnected and moved. This will prevent use conflict should the tribes be able to net fish again in Oakland Bay. The system is designed to be managed mechanically. Due to workforce shortages, growers are looking towards mechanization. Use of machines for these manual or repetitive functions also reduces on-job fatigue and injuries, while developing a more skilled workforce with more opportunities for advancement. Crews assigned to this farm will be trained on proper installation, signs, and tools for monitoring for wear or environmental interactions, and Taylor has employed a full-time compliance manager to audit and support farm BMPs. One maintenance harvest boat and one monitoring boat will be designated to this farm. An additional boat or vehicle needs will be completed by Taylor's existing fleet. Access to the site will be completed from Taylor's privately owned property at their Bayshore farm. This site is currently where crews and gear are staged out of. Next slide, please. The farm system is designed to be low profile, sitting less than 12 inches above the water surface. To maintain product integrity with high UV resistance while reducing visual impact by limiting color variability with enough contrast for navigation, the gear for the system will be black. These images here are visual renderings of the proposed farm from approximately 1,000 horizontal and 10 to 15 vertical. Next slide. This image is a similar system currently installed in Canada, BC, with a visual at 600-foot horizontal and 20-foot vertical. Next slide.
How big is that project? You know?
I believe that one is about 3,000 to 4,000 bags.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide. And another image of the same farm is at 1,800-foot horizontal and 6-foot vertical.
6 foot.
So from a boat. All right, next slide, please. Oakland Bay is a multi-use area. The system is designed for boat travel to be accommodated traveling either direction, east to west. Those wanting to navigate directly north to south would need to slightly alter their course and detour around the system. According to other users in Auckland Bay, motored recreation, including jet skis and water skiing, are not favored activities in the area due to the smaller size of the bay. These activities are more popular in the deeper and wider Totten Inlet. However, kayakers and paddleboarders do use the area and have frequented the existing near bottom operation to chat with employees and inquire about the system, asking questions about aquaculture. This system sits low on the water surface, again under 12 inches in height, and to aid boaters in being able to see the containers and lines, navigational buoys and or lights will be required by the U.S. Coast Guard, and the corners will be included on navigational charts. To offset the minor impacts to recreation, Taylor is offering formal access to 16.6 acres of its Oakland Bay tidelands for passive recreation, including walking and kayak rest points. These areas are near current public access points and extend public interest to the greater Oakland Bay area by making convenient connections to enhanced areas already in use for recreation. In addition, Taylor has reached out and offered to support current plans to improve and expand public amenities at the Oakland Bay Marina public launch. The marina manager has accepted Taylor's offer and will be in contact to articulate need once their permits are approved. Next slide, please. All right, on this map, it's hard to see, but the bottom two yellow parcels, 1 and 2, are the Sunset Road parcels, and those have been proposed as kayak rest points. Signage will be posted at the Oakland Bay Marina. In addition, Taylor's reached out to the Washington Water Trails to add the tideland location on their digital map and a kiosk, and they have accepted that. On the upper right corner near the red and purple, the Bayshore is a popular location, including walking trails and water access point from the Capitol Land Trust Preserve. Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife also manages a recreational access point for shellfishing and fishing, and Taylor's tidelands connect those two properties. And if the permit is approved, Taylor is willing to formally allow access to this land and the identified Bayshore parcels for passive recreation, not including shellfish harvest.
Do you recall what because I know that's in the exhibits already, do you recall what the number was for that? Because a lot of people seem to be interested in this one. I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but it's already on the city's website, so.
The public access memorandum is Exhibit 23.
Okay, great, yeah. So those of you who want to take a close look at it, it's on the webpage at Exhibit 23. All right, go ahead.
You bet.
Thanks.
Enhancements to the multi-use public launch at the Oakland Bay Marina. Taylor is committed to assisting the marina in its renovation of the public launch, and while that need is still being determined, Taylor has in-kind expertise, staff, and other resources to facilitate the project, and we will continue to work with them to help them meet that future need and expand service and amenities to existing public access. Next slide, please. And this slide is a video, if it can be played. This video shows boats traveling through the 30-foot lines at speed, and the system is designed specifically for boats to travel along the lines for management. U.S. Coast Guard rules require boaters to navigate at safe speed for the location and conditions.
So, and this is the kind of facility you're going to have? Which one is this one we're looking at?
This is in Canada.
Oh, the one in Canada. Okay.
All right, next slide, please. All right. Plastics, microplastics. These bags do not utilize single-use plastics. All of the gear is designed for the marine environment. They have enhanced UV resistance and durability, and the containers and floats are manufactured by Taylor at its Shelton campus. The resin Taylor uses is HDPE, resistant to breaking down physically and chemically within the environment. Debris. The system is robust in its construction. It has been field tested for the past 10 years in an extremely dynamic environment, much more harsh than those experienced in Oakland Bay. Still, per programmatic conditions, farm BMPs, as well as conditions recommended by the county staff and clarified by Taylor's August 8th letter, a dedicated crew will manage and monitor the floating bags at minimum twice each month, and again, following major storms or tidal events, such as king tides. Any gear wear will be noted and determined whether repair or replacement is needed. And these surveys are documented in a mobile field app and accessed by compliance managers, directors, and executives. Next slide, please. Wildlife use. A 3 to 5 person crew will be dedicated to this farm to manage all routine operations and maintenance. Regular management and human activity will decrease the likelihood of wildlife use, and to further discourage use of floating bags, the system does not provide a stable platform for haul-out of adult marine mammals. Taylor crews have observed very limited use by small or juvenile mammals of the floating system. Vertical lines are the anchor lines and are not loose even at slack tide, thereby preventing sufficient material for entanglement. A training module has been developed for the operation, incorporating recommendations from the Cascadia Research Collective, a local authority whose staff work with Department of Fish and Wildlife on outreach, marine mammal strandings, and necropsy work. This training will be shared and reviewed regularly with crews managing with the floating bags, and the module will be updated as new information becomes available. One more slide. Water quality. Taylor has been a strong advocate for local wastewater treatment improvements, riparian restoration, conservation purchases, and land use planning to improve habitat and water quality in Oakland Bay. We believe the addition of Shellfish will continue to aid in improvement of water quality through nutrient removal, and this benefit of water quality enhances the experience for all water-dependent uses. Last slide is thank you, and any questions?
Yeah, just a few. So somebody mentioned before about how many bags are going to be involved in this operation there?
It will take approximately 2 to 3 years for us to manufacture the bags and mobilize them, install the anchors. But at the 9.1 acres, approximately 30,000 bags
And that you said Canada was 6,000 or something, is that right?
on that one farm.
Yeah, so I mean, are there any operations anywhere in the country that are this big in one place?
No.
No, let the applicant answer.
This is our first permit in the United States, in Washington State. All
But I
of the
mean,
other
are you aware of
farms-
any other operation that comes close to this size for oyster bags, floating oyster bags?
Taylor has larger farms up in BC, but not that are 30,000.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's all the questions I have in this one. Thank
Okay.
you. Okay.
Thank you. Next we'll call Anna Andres.
Okay.
Oh, before we do that, we would request for Ms. Ewald's presentation to be entered as an exhibit.
Oh, that's right. Okay, any objections over entry of that? And Mr. Viscusi, will you be able to put that on the city website?
Yep.
Okay, any objections over entry of that document? Okay, hearing none, that'll be admitted as Exhibit 32. Okay, I will need to swear in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
All right, how do you spell your last name for the record?
Andres, Andres.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and Ms. Andres does not have a presentation, so we're going to do this more question and answer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Andres, for your time this afternoon. Can you please discuss your position with Taylor Shellfish and your job responsibilities?
I lead Taylor Shellfish existing near Bottom Oyster Bag Farm in Oakland Bay, which is located within Chapman Cove, just east of the proposed floating bag project. Taylor has been operating Chapman's Cove since the 1960s, and the farm was previously operated by other farmers since the late 1800s. This farm has been used for clam farming throughout its history, and Taylor has been farming oysters in a bag system for the last 5 years. In my role as the oyster farm lead, I oversee a crew of 5 to 6 employees at the Chapman Cove farm. I schedule and organize cultivation activities and supervise oyster farming operations. I also serve in a role as a clam harvester for the Chapman Cove. Clam harvesting takes place during low tides, which occur at different times of the day, depending on the season.
Okay, thank you. Can you just discuss for the examiner how long you've been working at the farm and approximately how much time you spend out there?
I've been working at Taylor Shellfish for 11 years now. I started as a clam digger in the Dosey Wallops farm, and then I transferred to Oakland Bay because I wanted to take advantage of the opportunities that the company will offer. And this was closer to home, so I had time to spend with families. I started working on the near bottom oyster bag farm in Chapman Cove around 5 years ago. Between my two roles, I typically spend at least 40 hours each week out on the farm. From October through April, I am at the farm during nighttime for clam harvesting, and there during both night and some daytimes for oyster bag maintenance and monitoring. From May through September, I am primarily there during daytime hours for both clam and oyster farming.
Okay, thank you. Can you next describe for the examiner the types of navigation or recreational activities you see within Oakland Bay and how frequently you see those activities occur?
Yes, most of the motorboats we see are other work boats, either the tribe, the crew for the mussel farm, or other growers. I might see one recreational motorboat a week, but they tend to spend less than an hour a day. We don't see much of any recreational boaters in the winter. We do see fishing boats in the fall when the salmon run through, but they mostly stay around Bayshore, which is located a half a mile to north of the proposed project site.
Okay, thank you. And can you next discuss for the examiner the relationship between the existing farm and other users within Oakland Bay?
Yes. Recreation in Oakland Bay has always been light. I don't see the farm interfering with recreation. If anything, having the farm and crews out on the water has been very helpful, as recreational users enjoy visiting the site and learning about aquaculture activities. In the summer, we mostly see kayakers. Last summer, we had a kayaker who wasn't familiar with the bay, and he was flipped out of his boat by the waves. Me and my crew were out there, keeping an eye on him. When he fell in the water, we went out and brought him back to shore. While there, another family with 2 small children, excuse me.
It's okay, take your time, it's not this.
Yep. While there, another family with 2 small children are about to go out, and we caution them of the wind and waves and encourage them not to go out on that day. Occasionally we get kayakers who circle the farm and ask questions about what we are growing. We also have visitors who are looking at Taylor Shellfish activities and farming operations, and we show them the bags and answer questions.
Okay, thank you. And then second to last question here, can you please discuss your expectations with respect to how this farm will operate and interact with users in the bay?
The proposed farm will use the same cultivation methods used by other farms that Taylor operates. As Aaron mentioned, the company will follow well-known conservation measures and management practices to minimize potential impacts on the environment and other users. We train regularly on the company modules for marine mammals, birds, and debris. We do regular debris patrols collecting debris we see on Shoreline. We mainly see garbage like bottles, shoes, lighters, and other household stuff. We rarely pick up aquaculture gear. I am excited about this farm as it will provide more seed not only to Taylor, but other shellfish farms throughout the area, as well as recreational shellfish farmers. I believe that the floating bag farm will be very similar in operation and maintenance to the existing bottom bags. Right now, our day is typically 4 to 5 hours because we need water at Bayshore to launch our boats and then be able to offload the boats. As the floating bag is built and additional bags are in operation, mechanization in a larger workboat will help us maintain the 4 to 5 hour schedule. We don't conduct routine farming activities at night for this farm. We need to be able to see the seed and bags and be on the boat safely.
Okay, thank you. And last question for you, what kind of oysters does Taylor currently farm at the Chapman Cove farm?
The Pacific oysters.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Okay, just a few. So for the current operation, it's 4 to 5 days, the one you're involved in. Is that, do you know, is that what you foresee is the amount of activity it's gonna be for the proposed use? Is 4 to 5 hours every day, is that right? 5 days a week or 7, or how often are people gonna be out there?
Our current right now is for 5 days a week.
Mhm.
It's like a regular, Monday
Yeah,
through Friday, yeah.
So, yeah, I'm kind of just wondering what people are gonna see that live nearby, so they're gonna see crews of, I mean, how many people do you think are gonna be at this operation? I don't know, maybe I should have asked the last person that, or,
Like I mentioned, it'll
Yeah.
be, it won't be max than 6,
more than 6?
It won't max out 6. It'll be 4 to 5.
4 to 5 hours, right, or 4 to 5 people, sorry.
Sorry.
Your Honor, we'd be happy to recall this.
Yeah,
to
okay,
address
sorry,
this
yeah, I
question.
wasn't sure,
Yeah.
yeah, so she knows, my question was more directed at, what can people expect to see when they're sitting in their backyard, on a typical day? How many days per week are the crews gonna be there? Is this gonna be a daily occurrence? How many hours, what kind of noises are they gonna be making when they're out there? I think somebody mentioned 2 or 3 boats are involved, is that right?
They've got one maintenance boat and one harvest boat.
Okay, and then, and that's all that's involved, and it was kind of like that picture you showed, I think there was a picture showing a boat that was out there.
Right,
Yeah.
so there's the boat that is going to load up the bags and be able to flip them. Oakland Bay is a major production facility for Taylor Shellfish, and there's multiple operations. And so in the summer, you're going to have farms up in kind of the bay, in Bayshore and Chapman Cove. This is a component that is going to help support all of those other goals. And so the boats for this system, that is how they're going to access the system, that's how they're going to manage it. And so it is likely that they would be out there 5 days a week.
Okay.
For about 4 to 5 hours a day.
Okay, is that like early morning, or what, I mean?
It's really, while it's not completely tide dependent,
Uh-huh.
they are going to have to, in
Okay.
order to get the large boats to onload and offload,
Yeah.
to be able to go out of Bayshore, there's going to have to be enough water. And so it will kind of rotate throughout the day during the
Okay.
summer.
Okay,
And then during the winter, obviously, they can work during the daylight hours that they've got.
and the equipment they use, is it noisy at all? I mean, I imagine we have the boat engines, of course, but are there winches or something that create loud noises, or how does that work?
The main noise is going to be coming from the generator that will help pull the lines up onto the boat. It's a 5 horsepower engine that we've got sound boxes that go around it in order to muffle it. It's a lot the same, it's just a small generator.
Okay,
We are looking to battery operations when that technology becomes available, but right now we're working with 5 horsepower engines.
Have you gotten any complaints about that at all? About the noise
Well,
from
right
those?
now, the operation is the near bottom floating bag farm, and I don't believe we've had complaints on that. I haven't
Okay.
received any.
I mean, do you know, I mean, if you're living 1,200 feet away, do you think you would hear those, or?
We have
monitor?
gone out and done, for some of the other generators that we've got, we've gone out with decibel readers, and we comply with the Mason County noise ordinance.
Okay.
So we're underneath that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, thank you for your time, Ms. Andrews.
Yeah,
All
you're
right,
welcome.
Ms. Andrews, you can sit down. Next, we're gonna call Mr. Caschiza.
Okay, good.
Can I interrupt just real quick?
Mhm.
Do we have a chance to cross-examine it in a sense, and is that what kind of going on here? I've never been to one of these.
Yeah, but because
parameters.
there's so many people, I can't really do that, I mean,
Because I'd like to indirect some questions a different way to see if the outcome comes a little differently.
Well, when it's your turn to speak,
Okay,
could you
all
just mention what you'd like clarified, and we can work on that, sure, yeah. All right, certainly swear you in. Do you swear, affirm, and tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
And how do you spell your last name for the record?
Chisla, Cziesla.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chisla does have a presentation, so we'll go and ask for that to be pulled up. We would be asking for this presentation to be entered as an exhibit.
Okay.
We also provided a resume for Mr. Chisla. We would also ask for that to be entered
Okay,
as an exhibit.
right.
All right. So, next slide on that, we'll kick right off. So I'm going to cover the location, which we've already heard some about, the existing site conditions, focusing primarily on natural resources. Then a couple slides on the potential impacts and benefits of the proposed project, and then a summary. That's a pretty short presentation. So.
Mr. Chisla, if you could just provide a very brief synopsis of your education and experience as is relevant.
Sure, yeah. So as you mentioned earlier, I have a master's in marine and fisheries biology. And for the last 27 or so years, I've been working as natural resource consultant. I'm a senior principal at Confluence Environmental Company. And I typically work on regulatory compliance at the state, federal, and local level, both for state, federal, and local clients as well as for private clients. So I'm usually evaluating projects for their environmental impacts under various regulations, including the Shoreline Management Act. As I mentioned, I also do third-party review on behalf of local entities or state entities of applicant-generated projects, and then do some research as well as restoration design for salmon enhancement projects. And then I've been involved with shellfish aquaculture for over 20 years, in fact, before grad school even, so longer than that.
Thank you, Mr. Chisla.
Okay. Yeah, so again, I mentioned this, next slide, please. So project location, I think we're all familiar with where we are, but a little bit more about Oakland Bay. It's a shallow estuary, about 4 miles long, 3/4 of a mile wide. Real shallow, so 10 to 35 foot depth. As we talked about, the culture area is 9.1 acres in that 50-acre lease. And then it's a floating system, and that bathymetry under the site is in reference to mean low water, about -10 to -5 feet mean low water. So there's always water under the operation, even at the most extreme low tides. Next slide. So the location is open water. The substrate is muddy, so silts and clays, fine materials. There's no eelgrass present in the lease area, and macroalgae, there's no macroalgae beds. There's some drift algae that is in the survey that showed up as coming through, like some ulva. But the substrate, as you know, macroalgae requires hard substrate attached to, and this area does not include that. There are occasional pieces of debris that might have some individual pieces of macroalgae, but no beds or other significant accumulations of macroalgae. The shoreline areas adjacent to the project, there's some salt marshes, some low marshes, dune grasses, and then other vegetation, riparian vegetation and residences, including some more industrial type uses. Next slide. So this represents water quality designations as it relates to shellfish aquaculture, and the green area represents approved areas. And it's important to note as you get further southwest in the bay that they aren't improved. So this is a good story over the long term, where more areas have now become acceptable and approved for shellfish aquaculture, and that's I think there's a strong relationship between shellfish and improved water quality conditions, as we'll get into a little bit further. Next slide. This slide shows one of the typical things that we'll look at with respect to shoreline projects is forage fish spawning locations. So we want to be sensitive to not citing projects where forage fish are occurring or where they're spawning. The green stripes are surf smelt spawning areas. Sort of the orange color is sand lance. And then on the far right, you'll see an area that's hatched in blue that has herring as well. So as you can see, that's all away from the project area, unlike many of the shoreline development projects where they're want to be sensitive about building a bulkhead or a pier in an area that has surf smelt sand lance spawning, or in areas where herring are spawning. Next slide. So getting into a little bit of the impacts and benefits. From a relative perspective, the culture adds approximately 0.3% additional culture to the subtidal zone in Oakland Bay. There are, from the array, some minor effects on circulation. As you can imagine, objects in the water create some drag. However, in looking at the profile of the float array and the fact that it does flex with the lines. Those sorts of effects are minimal and do not alter the circulation patterns in the bay. Because it's a floating array, other than the anchor portions, there isn't an effect on the benthic habitat below. And then again, the totality of anchors occupy about 0.2 acres of area on the bottom of the bay. From a species standpoint, there is overwater coverage. It doesn't stay static in one place, it moves, and it's has large areas in between. Any structure in the water has the opportunity to attract certain species that are structure oriented, so fish like surf perch or pile perch, even forage fish will spend time around that structure. And then of course the fouling community or the epiphytic community that grows on those structures can serve as food resources for a variety of species as well, especially for those fish species. For juvenile salmon, since it's out in the middle of the bay, juvenile salmon tend to migrate along the shoreline. They take advantage of that riparian habitat along the shoreline. So this is 1,000 feet from shore. So from a juvenile migration standpoint, there really isn't much interaction. Even if juvenile salmon were to be out in the middle of the bay, this sort of entry into the water column of a few inches doesn't represent any sort of migratory barrier or impediment to their travels. And there's been a variety of studies looking at that. I saw some comments on analogies with Hood Canal Bridge, which is a completely different system that goes over a dozen feet down into the water column, stretching across the entirety of the canal. So a very different setup than you would have here with a floating water structure that's very shallow in the surface layers. Visual effects, we've talked a little bit about that, but it's a very low profile structures that are in the water. So depending on your angle, if you're low, like you saw that picture earlier at that boat level, it's a very minimal sort of profile. Obviously from above, that changes the angle and you're visible, but again, it's not a big structure like a dock, pier, barge, or big ship. So next slide. This one also has a little video component to it. Yeah, if you just want to hit that, you can watch on the right-hand side as that changes. But the point here is that shellfish, as we know, do an excellent job of filtering the water. And this is a time lapse that represents about 15 minutes, but you can see how rapidly that tank is cleared of plankton. That feeding has a couple of environmental benefits. One, improved water clarity. Two, in terms of phytoplankton blooms, through that grazing, it often modulates blooms so you don't get into that situation where you have big blooms and big bloom die-offs, which then lead to some of the negative consequences with oxygen use and dead zones. So this regular feeding from the shellfish is a net benefit in terms of modulating that boom-bust cycle that phytoplankton can go through, especially as we have excess nutrient inputs from our various upland activities, leading to much higher concentrations than might have been here historically for plankton. The other part is that through that consumption, the material is incorporated into both the oyster tissue and shell. And harvest of that is one of the only ways that we actually are removing the results of that excess nutrient coming into the bay via filtering of that phytoplankton that are being fueled by those nutrients. So, there's on the slide here, I mentioned briefly that, if you assume the nitrogen production by a person, a farm like this removes nitrogen equivalent to, hundreds of coastal residents, just by virtue of filtering that water column and then taking that out of the aquatic system and for consumption upland. So that's unlike many of the other restoration projects that we work on. Although there might be some nutrient removal and absorption, that remineralizes as those plants or other animals decay in the system. So through the harvest part of this equation, that actually ends up being a removal of some of those excess nutrients via phytoplankton. Next slide. I mentioned forage fish before. Essentially, as is common on these, we want to look to where the farm is or any shoreline activity is in relation to those forage fish areas. So in this case, we're not having any effect on forage fish given the farm is outside of those areas. Just for reference, sand lance tend to spawn in that area of +5 at kind of a sandy to gravelly material, and surf smelt even a little bit higher in that intertidal +7 in the low water. So again, we're
Can someone move the mouse? Thank you. Or,
just going on with that, well, that's for an idle TV standby. Hopefully the TV won't turn off soon.
there should be a remote on that table.
Right here.
No, I think the TV.
Oh, TV remote right there.
Oh,
I might
maybe
as
get
well. I don't know if you want to trust my ability.
there we go.
Could switch the station, Judge Judy.
So as Aaron mentioned, and as is included in a lot of the documentation, there was a programmatic biological opinion that's part of the Endangered Species Act consultation that was carried out for shellfish aquaculture activities. It identified a variety of measures to help avoid and minimize potential effects, and the project will be complying with those. And as many of you are likely familiar, avoidance is the first sequence, then minimization, followed by some compensatory mitigation. And in this case, for especially listed species and other protected species, we're really in that no effect area, which is good news. So, next slide. So, as I mentioned earlier about fish and fish habitat for juveniles, we're outside of that closer shoreline habitat, which are key for that migratory pathway. You may hear about overwater structures and impacts on migrating juvenile salmon. That typically occurs when you have things like a pier or other overwater structure that's perpendicular shoreline, creating a static environment with a sharp light-dark interface that these juvenile fish will perceive and migrate around, going into deeper waters. In this case, we're out in the deeper water, so they're not tending to migrate there. If they are there, they're the larger size classes that are much more adept at getting around structures, as well as avoiding predators. And then, of course, given that this moves gently, it doesn't tend to create that same sort of obstacle that appear from shorewood. And then floating structure itself, as I mentioned too, has that epiphytic community, but also crab larvae and other organisms thrive within that are in turn prey for a variety of fish species, both the smaller species that feed on up into salmon and other of our larger top predators. Bird habitat, again, for the shorebirds and the dabblers and waders, that's we're away from the shoreline, so that's not interfering. Although I will say, a lot of the literature looking at shellfish aquaculture and bird use shows a positive correlation with birds. And then, as Aaron mentioned, for the floating culture, given there is some activity there on it, it's not expected to become a roosting site. These are turned and moved, so we don't have situations where long-term use of the structures would occur. And the disturbances with the small number of crew is relatively temporary as well. Next slide. So marine mammals, that's always a big and important topic. We have some iconic species that we have the pleasure of being able to see here in the Northwest. Most whales species won't make it here into Oakland Bay, as you know, although it is possible that you could get some larger whales coming in. I'd say pretty unlikely that you get a humpback or a gray or even a southern resident killer whale. You might see some of the bigs or the transient killer whales coming in, looking for seals, et cetera, that you'd find on some of the log booms, et cetera. So that's a possibility. And then more commonly, of course, seals and sea lions and a variety of porpoises that you probably commonly see here in the bay. So most whales and other cetacean marine mammals will have no problem navigating through and around and within that structure or avoid it altogether. There's been quite a bit of attention, if we want to go to the next slide. There's been quite a bit of attention focused on entanglement risks in recent months. You've probably seen articles in the paper of entanglements, and there's been a focus here on the West Coast as well on entanglements. Almost exclusively, those entanglements occur in situations where you've got large amounts of loose line or very loose line that they have the opportunity to get wrapped in. So you've been probably hearing about commercial crab fishery along the west coast having some entanglement issues. And that is something that's being discussed. This system doesn't have loose lines, so the opportunity for that sort of entanglement is not part of the setup. No reported entanglements with aquaculture gear along the west coast, and worldwide since 1982, there have been a total of 19 entanglements with aquaculture gear, and those were associated with mussel culture that have these long, free-floating lines that they use to collect spat in open water in New Zealand primarily. So 1982, 19, very, very low occurrence versus the hundreds of entanglements you do have reported per year related to lost fishing gear, net gear, ropes associated with that, and then the more recent observations with those commercial crab pots along the west coast. So I think I already hit on the point as to why entanglement with this type of an array is a very low risk. Next slide. Summary slide. Okay, so the culture avoids the sensitive habitats by being located outside of those or not above areas that are sensitive. It's not projected to have any sort of direct negative interactions with protected or vulnerable species. The farm has committed to and will comply with a variety of best management practices that further avoid and minimize any potential for effects of these species and habitats. It's cited explicitly to, again, not interact with some of the things like forage fish and shoreline migration zones. And then the water quality benefits that I mentioned as well from the filtration and the bioextraction by removing those shellfish from the system. And then, from what you can see in terms of some of the installation effects, those are going to be localized and limited in duration, and recovery from that placement of anchors will occur rapidly. So that's about all I had, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, first of all, any objections over entry of Mr. Cheesla's PowerPoint presentation or his CV resume, basically? Okay, here none. Those are admitted as 34, 35, respectively. Just a few quick questions.
We're on 33 and 34.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Okay, you're not right, I just want to make sure.
No, good. I'm glad you got that.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, 34, 35 then. Let's see. Oh yeah, first, Mr. Discuzzi's staff report said that your report suggests that there's no accretion or erosion impacts. Could you maybe more directly address that then? I mean, will the anchoring create any kind of, or any part of the operation create any accretion or erosion impacts in your opinion?
No, in fact, this has been looked at some arrays that have higher stocking density. So, for example, the mussel array and tot inlet, where you've got much higher density of organisms, since it's three-dimensional, it's not just on the surface. So since you do have currents, so any of that sort of biodeposition from pseudofeces, it's a fine material that'll be redistributed and not accumulate any appreciable amounts. In terms of the anchors themselves, it's a soft substrate, so they are placed in that. And you typically do see some very localized changes around an anchor. You get some attached organisms to that. That's a good thing from a three-dimensional structure. If you're an organism that likes three-dimensional structure, then you're going to benefit. And you've got plenty of sort of adjoining open flat areas. So I think I mentioned it's 0.02 acres total, so a very small fraction that would have that sort of anchor structure. Yeah. And in this bay, the sediments are not highly mobile, where we're getting a lot of sort of movement of sediments out. This ground sort of glacial estuary, and so there isn't that sort of this opportunity for that to be interrupted in this setting. So maybe if you were at a delta creek or another area where there was highly mobile, then those anchors would pose that sort of situation, but that's not what we have here.
Okay. Also, I dealt with the water quality issue with aquaculture a few times over the last few years here, and uniformly the studies I've been presented with show that they improve water quality because of filtration, that kind of thing. But in the last one, Shellfish proposal that I reviewed just a few weeks ago, the HMP actually pointed out to a study that said that the waste excreted by the shellfish, these were gooey duck in, and oysters feed phytoplankton, which could actually decrease water quality. And it seemed kind of, in that report, it was kind of inconclusive whether or not water quality would be improved. I mean,
Yeah.
are you familiar with that study? And I mean, what do you think about that?
Not that one specifically, although the concept, I mean, I think that's why I mentioned too, kind of that removal part, you know, of taking the shellfish out. Yeah, they do excrete, you know, the pseudofeces. The difference there, though, is, you know, that will sink to the bottom and be, you know, distributed and you know, organically decomposed, but it's taking it out of the water column as opposed to directly stimulating additional growth. But it's not, you know, you can see the effect on the water clarity, but there is still kind of another layer of cycling that occurs in terms of that nutrient, since they do generate some sort of, you know, waste product as well. But it's a net, you know, they grow, so it's a net reduction.
Okay.
Right? It's just not a fully one unidirectional error.
Oh, okay, okay. And then finally, we used to process a lot of shoreline permits for docks in Mason County a few years ago, and the studies that kept coming up all the time was they had shading impacts, which would cause juvenile salmon to go to deeper water and then be subject to predation. Do these create any shading impacts? I mean, I understand they're in the deeper water, but I don't know if that alteration of migration might have some adverse effects.
Well, there's a couple things there. One, yeah, those shading impacts. I will point out that most of those dock studies were done in freshwater when the juvenile salmon are, you know, so in lake settings like Lake Washington, et cetera.
Oh, right.
So they're more sensitive. Although there's some applicability to marine environments as well, and certainly that's the paradigm that's used at docks to create that structure. But it is really those smaller ones that are more shoreline oriented, that run into that light-dark interface and then go around, and since they're smaller, more vulnerable to predation. By the time you're in open water, the juveniles that choose to go out there are typically larger ones, less vulnerable to that predation. The other part I'd say is, in terms of the types of the species that do associate with structures, including docks, those tend not to be, those are not most often fish-eating species, like they're not predators on salmon. So while there are, you know, pile perch and shiner perch, a variety of species that associate with the structure, they don't in turn aren't the salmon eaters. So yeah,
okay.
but so it's kind of an apples and oranges, docks versus this, both
Yeah,
by
absolutely.
location and the type of structure.
Okay, okay, great, thank you, sir, appreciate
sure.
your testimony. Okay, anything else from the applicants?
That concludes our witnesses' presentation. I did just want to briefly touch on two items that you raised earlier, to provide some responsive information. So one had to do with the public trust doctrine,
Right.
and whether that applies to use of tidelands at low tide. And there's two sources of authority I wanted to draw your attention to. One is an Attorney General opinion. That's Attorney General opinion 2007, number 1. That includes a note that states Washington common law also shows that the private property interest in the shellfish farm allows the farmer to restrain the general public from interfering with the farm, and that includes a citation to a case, Swim Bay Canning Company versus Butte, 49 Wash 127. There's a second piece of authority, a recent decision by the Court of Appeals for the state of Washington denying a motion for discretionary review from a trial court determination that the public does not have the right to use tidelands at low tide. The Washington Court of Appeals denied the motion for discretionary review, stating that that is well settled law. The public does not have the right to use privately owned tidelands at low tide. That is case number 839021. I'd be happy to provide the examiner with that decision
Yeah,
tonight.
so I know there's an unpublished opinion that reaches that conclusion. I don't know if that's the same one you're referring to, but as I said, my impression was it hadn't been addressed yet, basically, but yeah, so.
Yeah,
That's a
I'd be
recent
happy to-
opinion, yeah. Yeah, no, I've got your citation, so I'll look into it, great,
Okay,
thank you.
excellent. So again, that concludes our presentation. We would again respectfully request that the examiner issue the permit with the proposed revisions as with proposed revisions as revised by.
Okay, well, at this point, let's take a break till 2:30, and then we'll start into the public testimony portion of the hearing, so we'll see you at 2:30. Who said that they needed to be out in a few minutes or something? There was one person that had to leave right away. Does that person want to speak now? Yeah, I'll get you up there, sir. And then I'll go through the list. Come on up. All right, sir. Just we swear you in. Do you swear affirm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
And what's your last name? How you spell it?
Wilson, W-I-L-L-S-O-N.
Okay, I think I can handle that one. Okay, go ahead.
My name is Roger Wilson. My wife and I live on East Sunset Road in a home overlooking Oakland Bay. We are opposed to the commercial agricultural plan for both personal and community reasons. Today, Oakland Bay provides picturesque views that are postcard worthy. A floating oyster farm, I think, would destroy those views, and along with it, our property value. That's obviously very appalling to me, given how much I have invested in my property. But it's also appalling because this plan is not in the best interest of the Shelton community. I read material and heard presented today material that Oakland Bay is not used recreationally, or at least not used very much. I disagree. Every day, we're out on our balcony, we see people out there. They are water skiing, tubing, sailing, jet skiing, paddleboarding, kayaking, fishing, and swimming. All that activity going on out there in the bay. We watched airplanes draw water out of the bay while they were fighting the McEwen fire last month. So despite what I've read and what I've heard, the bay is in fact being used by the community in many ways. I think putting an agricultural farm on the bay would most certainly hamper those activities. Oakland Bay is a natural resource and as such should be available for the community to use. We should be striving to make Shelton a place where people want to live and enjoy the outdoors. Eliminating recreational activities on the bay is a step in the wrong direction. I haven't heard a single person who lives on or near Oakland Bay say that they are in favor of this plan. We're homeowners, we're taxpayers, and we don't want this. We don't want our views destroyed. We don't want our property values to drop. We don't want the community to be denied access to a large portion of a natural resource. And we want the bay to be available to firefighters when they need it. I believe that putting a commercial agricultural farm on Oakland Bay is not for the community and should not be approved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Oh, you have something in writing there you want?
Well, it's in writing.
Oh, okay, what you just read? All right.
Who do I
yes,
hand this
let's
off?
hand it up here. Yeah, that's what we're putting it there, yes. That'll work. Thank you, sir. All right, okay. Let's see, all right, so now it's, I'm just,
Honestly, you guys over there, when you're whispering, we can hear it, so please.
okay. All right, yeah, be careful about that. Yeah, you might not want your whiskers to get into the transcript, I don't know, that could be. All right, so this next one I can't quite read, it's Shina, first name S-H-I-N-A, and I can't read the last name. Did Shina want to say something? Sheena? Okay, let's see, Kyle Lentz. Oh, there she is. All right, ma'am, let me swear you in. Do you swear firm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay,
Yes.
great. And how do you spell your last name?
Wysocki, it's W-Y-S-O-C-K-I.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. Go ahead.
I'm Shina Wysocki, and my family owns Chelsea Farms, and I have the pleasure of doing business with Taylor Shellfish, and I'm the second generation doing it. My mom has done business with Bill and Paul since she started in the shellfish business. She dug clams at Bayshore. It was her first shellfish farming job. We buy seed from Taylor Shellfish, and we think this project should be approved. This is a new type of aquaculture for our area, but not in general. Other farms are using this. And we need to explore new options and ways to farm shellfish. The availability of seed is always stressful. The hatcheries battle climate change and ocean acidification. And we need options in how we farm shellfish. I have the pleasure of having Taylor Shellfish Farm in front of my house. I farmed in front of Bill's house. I know what the visual impacts of shellfish farming is. My farm is about 10 acres on Eld Inlet, and people are welcome to look at that on Google Maps and see the visual impact. So I welcome any questions.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your testimony. All right, next is Kyle Lentz, and after him is Kim Thompson, and give people time to get up here. Is Mr. Lentz here? All right. Mr. Lentz, let me swear in. Do you swear to affirm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay, great. And it's Lentz, is that right?
Yes.
All right, great. Go ahead.
I'll make my comments quick. I'm Kyle Lentz. I'm a second-generation shellfish farmer. You just heard from my sister. Her and I manage our shellfish farm together for our family. We're really proud of what we're able to do on the tidelands here in southern Puget Sound. My comments are in support of the application for Taylor's. Like my sister said, we do a lot of work with them extensively. It's great to see the opportunity for additional jobs in this county. I know that that comes with opportunity for people. So I'm not going to make a lot of comments today, but my support for the application.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lentz. All right, as I said, Kim Thompson is next, and after her is Peggy Youngberg. Ms. Thompson, you here? There she is.
Hello, my name is Kim Thompson. Thank you for this.
Sorry, in there.
Oh,
Do you swear
sorry.
affirm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay, that's THOMPSON?
It is.
All right, great, go ahead.
My name is Kim Thompson. Thank you for this opportunity to comment. I am the Executive Director for the Pacific Coast Shellfish Growers Association, and we represent oyster, clam, mussel, and other bivalve shellfish growers here in the state of Washington, as well as California, Oregon, Hawaii, and Alaska. But most of our members are here in the state of Washington, where shellfish farms are major employers and they provide stable, well-paying jobs in rural areas, which diversify and strengthen local economies. Our growers are highly dependent on healthy ecosystems and water quality, a recurring theme in this talk, to support their livelihoods. They strive to operate in a manner that results in the best outcomes for society and the environment. Working in collaboration with local, state, and federal agencies, tribes, NGOs, community groups, researchers, and many others, Washington shellfish growers are champions and often leaders in catalyzing important research and conservation of Washington's marine ecosystems and watersheds. Research shows that shellfish farming can provide many benefits to local communities and society at large, including a source of nutritious food that uses almost no land or fresh water, a food source that will support a more resilient food future in the changing climate, and again, a source of jobs, particularly in those rural coastal communities where other opportunities might be more scarce. They are also an important ally in the fight for clean water and healthy ecosystems. There's no such thing as zero-impact food production, but shellfish farming comes pretty darn close as one of the most benign methods of food production on the planet. Taylor Shellfish is an important supplier of seed for Washington shellfish growers, many of our members, as you've heard from some of them today. And this project is going to provide much needed capacity and resilience for our seed supply, and in turn that will support Washington shellfish growers and the many businesses and communities that they support. We thank you very much for your consideration for this important project, and we hope that you will approve and push it through. It will be an important contribution to an important source of climate-friendly food, as well as jobs in the economic activity that support local communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. All right, next, as I said, is Peggy Youngberg, and after her is Alice Duncan. And actually, when I called two names, if both people could come up, so we don't have delays in one person after another. Is Ms. Youngberg out there? Nope. Okay, how about, what is it, said Alice Duncan? Yes. All right, and after Ms. Duncan is Susan Davidson. So, okay, Ms. Duncan, let me swear you in. Do you swear or affirm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay, DUNCAN, is that right?
That's correct.
All right, great, go ahead.
I'm against Taylor Shellfish doing any more business in Oakland Bay. It's just a beautiful place to live. I lived on Oakland Bay for 5 years, and it was the best 5 years of my life. And it would just be a total travesty for this to happen. I won't say any more because I've already written what I wanted to say, and it's you've already gotten it. But I do have a question for Taylor Shellfish, and that is, what portion of your market is international sales?
And if you could answer that one during the applicant response, that'd be good. And I'll write these down too to make sure they're
Okay.
answered. And if they're not answered, let us know. And
Okay,
we'll answer.
and once if this is approved and they increase their production, then what would be their portion of international sales?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, like I said, Ms. Davidson is next, and after that is, let's see here, Aaron Louder. Okay. All right, and Ms. Davidson, you swear affirm tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay, that's DAVISON?
Correct.
All right, go ahead.
All right, my first statement is, given the discussion that's been said about the existing farms, the one that is Chapman is 3,000, we're talking about 30,000 bags, which doesn't make any sense. We don't have anything in which to compare this against. So we don't know about the impacts, the marine impacts, everything else. And so the consideration of moving from a consideration of 3,000 to 30,000 doesn't make any sense, and we request that not be allowed, okay? As I'm an urban planner by trade, I know that it's a possibility that this may be allowed, and so I'm gonna make a couple statements. Mr. Confluence, I can't say his last name, we do have transient orcas that come through on a regular basis. I'm concerned about them. I actually live down off of Hammersley, and we have a bell and it rings on a continuous basis. So we see them on a regular basis. Orcas, seals, and everything else don't read signs, don't take advantage of the marine fabrication, the things that are being done, the extra kayak places. They don't take advantage of it. They take advantage of our bay. So I have concern about whether they will be harmed or not. And so my request is that there be testing done on a regular basis, and that it be written in, if it's approved, that there be regular testing done every 6 months or every year. And we're talking about debris, fish habitat changes, water quality issues, marine impacts, invasive species, the whole list and gamut that runs it, so that we as a public know what's happening. Because if this does get approved, we want it posted somewhere every 6 months or every year, whatever the requirement would be, so we can see what's happening and we can push back, okay? And we can understand what the impacts are. Because you're talking about, you know, a massive impact in the bay, and so we're requesting that please make it public so we know what's happening within the land that we actually share. The next is actually, we have a little, I would like it to be confirmed, what is actually the lease time that's being requested? In my notes say 99 years, I don't know where that came from, but I heard 10 years today. I would like it clarified in today, that how long is the lease for? I would also like to know how many extensions are allowed under this lease period, because we know that things get moved out, and that if there are any issues, that lease cannot be extended. There has to be some replications that if something impacts or there's some changes from something happens, that we're aware of what's going on, we understand the ramifications, and this company actually does what they say they're going to do. That it be fair, okay? And that there are limits to the number of extensions. Last piece is I do request that no non-native oysters, please. From a woman who actually clears out Scottish broom on a regular basis, okay? You all know what I'm talking about, okay? Non-native is impactful, so we're talking about something that we just don't know how big of impact this is gonna have. And the request is, please do not allow non-native species. So we can actually, if something happens, we can measure it, know what's going on, and then it can be looked at, all right? So, and then I have one last request. Sorry, I'm hitting my 5 minutes. There was a request for, the individual said 3,000, Chapman. She's got 4 to 5 hours. They work during the day. I'm requesting that the extension on both sides for the winter time not be allowed, okay? Because that impacts the people that all live there, and they're impacted by that light. And so they're aware of when the times change and such, and so request that not be allowed, that they work with, they're only working 4 or 5 hours, they work within that time frame, within the daylight hours in winter. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Definitely can tell you're a planner. All right. Next is Aaron Louder, and after that is Dean Jewett, I believe. Louder, Mr. Jewett. Oh, see somebody running up here. So, all right. Okay. Let me swear you in. Do you swear affirm tell the truth and nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
Yes.
Okay, and let us know who you are, how to spell it.
Yes, Aaron Loader, Loader.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
This is going to be short and sweet. I'm with Sierra Pacific Industries. We have already sent in an email detailing the reasons why we support this project, but I just wanted to publicly say that we do support this Taylor Shellfish project. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, next is Dean Jewett, and after him is Elizabeth Field. Mr. Jewett, let me swear you in. Do you swear affirm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
And that's J-E-W-E-T-T, is that
Correct.
right? Okay, great, go ahead.
So great article in the Journal, and I kind of want to touch base on, it seemed to me that Taylor was parading individuals up here with rehearsed answers or canned answers, is what it seemed like to me. That's my observation. The nice lady that came up with the answers that the lawyer was asking, it didn't seem sincere, you know, whether it be truthful or not. But when we talk about the recreational use of Oakland Bay, I've been messing around on Oakland Bay since I've been 4 or 5 years old. I learned how to sail. Last time I knew, you couldn't sail a boat in 30 feet. So if we're going to try to go through the oyster fields, apparently we can't use a sailboat. Okay. We also, off of the paper's article, 200 interactions, that the journalist wrote about. 49 comments, 43 of them with concerned or in opposition. Seems well over 90%. My family has a contract with Taylor United down in Hammersley Inlet. I grew up on both sides of Hammersley Inlet, so I'm very well aware of what we do there. So to say that there's only, a couple boats a week that go through there, I guess they just must be taking a picture of my boat. And I'm the only one that they take a picture of. So I guess I'm just concerned about that. Because there's a lot of people that are in there, and they're in there for well over an hour. So to have somebody say that it's not a recreational boat and they're employed by Taylor United carries absolutely little to no weight. One of the studies that they refer to is the project would be visually evident but not obtrusive, according to the agricultural sitting study prepared for the State Department of Ecology. When? 1986. As far as I know, that's just a few years after I graduated, to tell you how old I am. So I strongly oppose it. I don't think we need it. There's enough people farming shellfish up and down the bay on all those sides. They want to put something like this in, go put it up in Quilcene, go put it in a bay that there's not a lot of people living already. And if they don't, I guess is Taylor going to be writing checks for diminished value on people's houses. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, Elizabeth Fluke, as I said, and then after her, it's like Anna Andrus, and was that an applicant witness already, or Miss Andrus?
Yes, that is
okay.
true.
So after Ms. Fluke then is, I think it's Susan Gonzalez. So is Ms. Fluke out there? Up there, yeah. Okay, let me swear in. Do you swear affirm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
Yes.
And that's F-L-U-K-E, is that right? Okay, great, go ahead.
I moved to Shelton when I came to Washington looking for a job as a nurse. And I came to this rural setting as opposed to being in Seattle where they have all that stuff on the water. Because this is a beautiful outdoors place where people come for outdoor vacations and to enjoy the peaceful setting. The environmental impact on the vulnerable species is well and good, but you didn't mention the vulnerable species of people. People are vulnerable to stress, and this is an environmental stress. In a rural setting, when I went outside the first night I lived here, you could see all the stars. If you put in this operation, and they said they're not going to do it at night, but they're going to have lights for the Coast Guard, and they'll probably have lights for security, and that's light pollution. You won't see the stars anymore. And I don't know what the purpose of this is, because it doesn't sound like you're going to have a big tax base. I have a tiny little piece of property across the street from the water, and I get charged for that view over $500 a month, and it keeps going up every year. And I'm on a fixed income. And as soon as I started living here, I reached out to find out what are invasive species, be a good neighbor, try to take out those things that are invasive, plant the native plants. And so you want to have good neighbors, planting good plants. I don't know if this is going to help pay the property taxes. It doesn't sound like it because it's the water, so I don't know how that works. I don't know if it's going to decrease our property taxes, but we pay a lot of money to have that beautiful view. There was something else I was going to say, but I can't remember it now. Anyway, I hope that you don't approve this. Oh, here we are, this small town atmosphere, which is very important to me. That's why I moved here. And you're gonna have the biggest ever operation of oysters, and you're only going to employ 4 or 5 people? That's not making sense to me.
Okay, Ms. Gonzalez, and then after Ms. Gonzalez is Dave Douglas. Sorry, Ms. Gonzalez, do you swear affirm tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
Yes.
And that's Gonzales, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
We bought a house on Route 3 years ago on Oakland Bay. As a science teacher, this house is my final dream project after 40 years of teaching. We could have bought anywhere in the entire world, but we chose Shelton and specifically Oakland Bay. We had researched purchasing retirement home for 5 years from the Columbia to the King County area. It's not a free and clear house. We have 27 more years to pay on our dream house, and we're happy to do it with a great view. I oppose this commercial project based upon the mere fact that the year numbers keep changing. There's no way that all the residents received the number 99 and we all came up with that. If we have read it, we'll find it. Today we hear 10 years. No matter what, that is too long. If it's already a done deal under the table, it should be moved to a 2-year lease, or at least to have enough data to collect on the amount of trash, effects on wildlife, especially the orca whales they do tour through. I don't know who got that idea. We have videos. Salmon and seals. I do work a lot, but I still have many recreation activities and pictures of sailboats, motorboats, yachts, water skiers, jet skiers, because recreation may be mostly on the weekends. Maybe the workers don't see that. If Taylor Shellfish truly cared about the neighborhood, they would have done more, or maybe the county would have done more, than 2 neighbors who received postcards and a letter that looked like junk mail. I personally went door to door for 3 weekends with flyers and taped them on doors to let people know. It wasn't Taylor Shellfish and it wasn't our county. Let's not forget the postage stamp sized notes that are posted, or 8.5 by 11 sheets at the end of Taylor's entrance to the top of that bay. The speed limit is 50 miles an hour. I videotaped it myself. It's like this. It's very small. We have a neighbor 2 doors down who chose to have their own shellfish development. Personally, I think it's ugly, and I wouldn't want to have one myself. But I don't have a problem with it because it's directly in front of their own house. Taylor is choosing to be in front of all of our houses, and Taylor does not live there as far as I know. 50 acres is really big, and I can't even add a dock. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dave Douglas.
Question for the commissioner. Will the Zoom callers have an opportunity to make comments?
Yeah, callers will as well, yeah.
Great, thanks.
In case my comments go beyond
okay.
reasonable period, provide a copy of the text. My name's David Douglas. My wife and I own a home at 1020 East Sunset Road. As a point of clarification prior to starting my remarks, I just want to state that the edge of the bank along Sunset Road really runs from about 5 to 6 feet above the beach up to about 30 to 35 feet at the entry to the park. So it's not quite as extensive a climb as I think Mr. Viscusi might have intimated, saying 50 to 90. Elevations on the houses are probably closer to that height. I'm an industrial real estate broker and have been practicing in Washington State since 1979. I've earned the designation as a certified commercial investment member of the Realtors National Marketing Institute, and since 1991, I've been an industrial designee or industrial member of the Society of Industrial and Office Realtors. My comments today are going to address 3 points. 1, the proposed conflict with the Mason County Residential Rural 5 zoning, which is adjacent both sides of the bay. The applicant's conclusion that environments in which other large-scale industrial oyster operations operate are comparable to Oakland Bay, which we believe is wrong. 3, the negative impact of the project on Mason County property tax revenues over the life of the project is significant and should be considered by the county. Addressing the residential 5 zoning, my practice is focused quite heavily upon land acquisitions and dispositions. I've therefore navigated the State Environmental Policy Act process several times, many times for different projects. Typically, the SEPA determination is not issued within the 120-day minimum term. Usually, you're experiencing 9 to 12 months of time before a decision can be rendered. This is the first time in over 40 years of experience where I've seen a jurisdiction issue a DNS, or determination of non-significance, within a week of the applicant's complete filing of their application. Most importantly, the DNS was issued prior to any delivery of notice to any of the neighboring ownerships which may have been impacted. The surprising thing that I find is that this is occurring in a state where we pretend to protect the environment and advocate for endangered species. Property proposed by Taylor Shellfish lies outside the urban growth boundary, which has been defined by Mason County. It's located between 2 land areas zoned rural residential 5 acres on the north and south sides of Oakland Bay. The closest area is not classified RR5 over 1 mile north of the proposed location at Johnson Creek, where there's a 47-acre parcel owned by Capital Land Trust, which is zoned rural tourist, and close to 3/4 of a mile east at the end of Chapman Cove, which land is classified as agricultural resource lands. The county has identified no zoning classification over the bodies of water such as Oakland Bay. Reviewing the Mason County Code Section 17.04.222, uses permitted under rural residential 5 shows that, open quote, single-family residential, hobby farm, in parentheses, small-scale commercial agriculture, including aquaculture and woodlots, close parentheses, church, local community recreation centers, group homes, cell towers, fire stations, fish hatchery, and public utilities, close quote, are the permitted uses. The proposed 50-acre industrial aquaculture site in no understandable way would be classified as a hobby farm. The only industrial uses allowed within the RR5 zoning are cottage industries, which they also classify as home occupations. The code defines this as small-scale commercial or industrial activities on residential properties performed in the residence or building accessory thereto. The principal practitioner must reside on the property. Cottage industries are considered as residential uses, provided they do not significantly alter the character of the site as a residential property, and wholesale and retail trade is minimal. The issuance of the DNS without any required mitigation is quite astounding, particularly for an unusual waterfront development, which will be precedent-setting, located within shoreline and shoreline buffers in an area zoned RR5. At best, this decision evidences the lack of Mason County's attention to any semblance of governmental best practices and lacks a standard of care exercised by every other county in which I have practiced real estate. Moving on to the comparison to other
Yeah, I think,
areas.
yeah, Mr. Douglas, I think as you mentioned, yeah, this has taken a bit more than 5 minutes, and I guess, you know, just to try to keep some control on the time.
Not a problem.
I take it your wife is Jeannie Douglas. She could read the rest of your written statement if
She
you
has
want.
different comments.
Oh, sure. Mr. Douglas, do you want your written comment made an exhibit? Mr. Douglas? Mr. Douglas, do you want your written comments made an exhibit?
Please.
Oh, okay, what's the number that you have, Cal? I think we're at 34 then, is it?
35.
35, okay, any objections over Mr. Douglas's written?
I did want to ask about the exhibit entrance. Would it be better that all submitted public comments since my staff report be entered as one exhibit following the hearing?
I think let's make them separate just because they're, so it's clear what came in during the hearing and there's no confusion over that. So, all right, so this is 34, was it? I'm sorry, or 35?
35.
Okay, 35, yeah. Any objections over entry of this email, or rather written statement from Mr. Douglas? Okay, hearing none, it's entered. I'll give the copy to the applicant so they have a chance to look it over. If you could give that back to me, that's my only copy, so. All right, great, okay.
I have a
Ms. Douglas.
copy of my remarks that I just left with
Oh,
you too.
okay, great. All right.
Under oath, we were
Oh,
just.
Ms. Douglas, let me
Oh,
swear you
sorry.
in. Yeah, do you swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I will.
Okay, great, thanks.
Under oath, we were just presented with at least 4 renditions of what the aquaculture site is going to look like. What is the truth of what the aquaculture site is going to look like? This is what was in your application. I have seen round things, square things, flat things, all kinds of things, and I don't know what the truth is of what your aquaculture site is going to look like. I'd like to know. That's my first question. Also, living on the bay, we often see Taylor boats going weekends and nights, so I don't think that you were being truthful in sharing that information. Get back to my remarks. My name is Jenny Douglas. My husband and I own property on East Sunset Road in Shelton. We are here with probably a handful of others in this room who, in my opinion, are unique and that we are not currently being held hostage by the greed of Taylor's Shellfish Company. However, that may soon change if we are forced to accept an industrial oyster growing complex and production complex being inserted into Oakland Bay. Unlike Mason County, the Squaxin Island Tribe, Oakland Bay Marina, and a handful of state agencies, we are here solely to advocate for the future of Oakland Bay and its fragile ecosystem that has clearly been ravaged by industry over the decades, and with full transparency to protect the value of our property. After reading Mason County's recent recommendation to approve the installation of an industrial aquaculture site in the only deep water section of Oakland Bay, I was left stunned by what seems to be the county's leadership's collective ignorance and apparent complacency in accepting the deal Taylor has made. Taylor's offer of mitigation is laughable and honestly insulting. Let's make it clear. Anyone who believes Taylor Fish is being generous in its offer of access to 16.169 acres of mudflats, some of which is accessible only by descending a rope, in exchange for their limitless use of 50 acres of prime waterway owned by the people of the state of Washington, can only be misguided in their expectation of fair play. Taylor has one goal in this and its other corporate grabs around the state, and that is to enrich Taylor Shellfish Company. Not only are these mitigation parcels to remain under ownership of Taylor, from which they will still benefit, but Taylor will also be the sole beneficiary from compromising the health and safety of we the people's waterway in perpetuity or until they have completely abandoned the project. I have seen no comment about who would be in charge of the oversight of this industrial complex. What I have heard is from DNR employees themselves who claim to be so understaffed they couldn't supply me with a list of 22 shellfish leases that they currently have in the bay. We have learned that Taylor doesn't make a very good neighbor, and that that makes sense in that once they grab a hold of this, bar the doors, because the precedent-setting nature of this project will open the literal floodgates for Taylor to move in wherever they please. Please note, the waterways Taylor cites, where there is currently industrial floating aquaculture, are in no way comparable to Oakland Bay, other than being water. Truth be told, this project will insert the largest industrial aquaculture site in the state in the middle of a very small estuary. A few of us have been asked by the government how many times we kayak or sail the bay. Since when did the private recreation of a community become anybody's business, let alone the scale on which equal access to state-managed waterways are based? Since when did the scope of some random individual's perspective represent all who live in the vicinity of this proposed project? Many of us here today have a scope with a much greater perspective. And finally, when can we once and for all say no to Taylor's greed? I beg you, sir, to use your power to do that today. Thank you.
Okay, next are the Lannings, William and Kathy Kent.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know that we had a check to testify.
Oh, no, I'll ask if anybody else wants to test. Once we get done with the list and we're done with the people on the virtual, we'll go to asking anybody else. So. All right, Mr. Lanning, you swear to affirm to tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
And that's Lanning?
It is.
Okay, great.
Good afternoon. My name is William Lanning. I have lived on Oakland Bay for the past 25 years. One cannot ask for a more beautiful, serene, and tranquil setting on this earth. Oakland Bay is considered a gemstone of our county. Hopefully it will continue to be so. If this lease application is approved, not only waterfront home residents will be affected, but all county citizens will have lost something very special in their lives. This proposed plan will forever change the nature and the character of our region. The waterfront folks won't be the only ones affected by this floating contraption that will benefit only one company's profit. Let's see, where am I? No, the application is for a 10-year lease with options following. Think of this eyesore floating in the middle third of the bay for at least the next 10 years. What a tragedy this would be. All homes in the area will see diminished values. As a result of this revaluation, property tax revenues will be significantly diminished as well, negatively impacting city and county public services. These issues are certainly troubling, but there's one that is most concerning. That is our apathy related to what our role as humans is toward our environment. I was raised believing that we have a special responsibility in ensuring that our natural environment be protected and that we are deemed appointed stewards of our special home. Let's be good stewards and protect the natural beauty of our bay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Lanning, on the swear in, do you swear affirm to tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
And after Ms. Lanning is Bill first there, so, okay, go ahead.
I'm gonna give you these.
Thank you.
I just wanted to reference the earlier testimony about the activity in Chapman Cove, saying it was Monday through Friday. It's weekends also. I've seen it. It's a lot of weekends, Saturday and Sunday. So anyway, my name is Kathy Catlani, and I have resided on Oakland Bay for 30 years. My late in-laws bought the property in the 1960s, so they are familiar with Taylor Shellfish and the oyster dikes at the mouth of and in the interior of Chapman Cove. I am sure they would have been dismayed to learn that Taylor is currently proposing an industrial floating oyster aquaculture in the middle of the bay they loved, affecting the aesthetic quality of the area and lowering home values. We now know that those log booms that were prevalent on the bay in the past helped contribute wood waste to the water, thereby adding to the contaminants presently in the sediment. A study by the Department of Ecology in 2011 determined that Oakland Bay sediment identifies above acceptable levels of dioxins and furans. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Is it prudent to disturb the contaminated sediment on the sea floor by placing 60 anchors and up to 30 screw anchors installed in the center of each line? If there are 30 double lines with each line requiring 30 screw anchors, that will either be 900 or 1,800 for double line screw anchors. Let us err on the side of caution, as this oyster bag floating aquaculture lease proposal is being pushed forward without truly understanding the consequences of that action. We can't underestimate the effect this unnatural barrier will have on sea life, including southern resident killer whales who have been known to feed in the area. I was excited to actually see 3 killer whales in our bay last summer. The Taylor proposal will be a floating oyster net barrier that is similar to the killing fields at the Hood Canal Bridge. Salmon and other fish species are thwarted in traversing past the floating bridge on their outward journey, resulting in a high mortality rate as they are picked off by hungry seals and sea lions. During this past winter, early spring, I noticed a sharp decline of ducks, geese, loons, and other seabirds normally present in Oakland Bay close to Chapman Cove. I came to the conclusion it was more than likely due to all the boat human activity who worked the Oyster Bay cultivation system in Chapman Cove. We often see worker activity every day of the week as the scope of the project has increased. The environmental cost of this proposal would be a disaster for the wildlife in the rest of the bay, as they too would be adversely affected by all the farming activity. Thank you for considering my comments. I am strongly opposed to final approval of this application. The benefit of this project is not to the community, but to the bank account of Taylor Shellfish. Let us all be good stewards of Oakland Bay's fragile ecosystem and preserve it for future generations to come. Thank you.
And Ms. Catlani, you handed me a study
That was
here.
what I was referring to in my...
Okay. Do you want to put that in the record as an
Yes,
exhibit?
please.
Okay, all right. Any objections over the Bud Inlet and Oakland Bay dioxins and furans 2011 sediment results?
Your Honor, we have no objection to the entrance of that exhibit. We are also aware that a number of comment letters were submitted very recent to this hearing. So we have no problem with those being part of the exhibit, provided we're allowed an opportunity to provide some sort of written response.
Okay,
We'd ask that to be about a week after.
Okay, all right, yeah, we'll deal with that at the end of the hearing, but I will give you a chance to do that. All right, and this is 36 then, admitted as exhibit 36. All right. Okay, so next is, as I said, Bill Fierst and then Florence Fierst, and I probably got your pronunciation wrong there, but let me swear you in first, sir. Do you swear affirm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Both of you, okay. And how do you spell your last name? I'm not quite...
It's Fierst.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, good.
So we are Bill and Florence Fierst. We own the property at 1080 East Sunset Road. I'm very concerned with this project and I oppose it. And at the end, I'll list where it violates the code of Mesa County. We spend most weekends in the summer, you won't find us out there in December, kayaking on the beach. Last weekend, we had 10 people out there with 4 kayaks. And next weekend, we have friends and family coming as well. Our 2 grandsons have stated that this is the most beautiful place in the world, and they'd rather be here on the bay kayaking than anywhere else in the world. There was some discussion about what was going to be out there would be low to the water. Well, most of the houses are high to the water, so this is what it's going to look like. It's not going to be looking at 12 inches off the ground. It's going to be ugly as far as aesthetics go. It would be terrible to impede the navigation. If I start in the middle, which probably where my property is, to get across the water, I'm going to have to go 800 feet that way, across the bay, and 800 feet that way. I'm in good shape, but that's a lot of paddling. This project is not in the public interest, it is only in the interest of a large corporation. This next I'll go with the county codes. I won't repeat them each time, but just the ends of them. County Code 1759-210A10 states, recognition should be given for the possible impacts of aquatic activities might have on the quality of the shoreline area. And certainly, looking at 1,600 feet of these cables is going to impact the view from the shoreline. And 210A12 states, aquaculture activities should be operated in a manner that allows navigational access to shoreline and commercial traffic. Well, you've seen the picture that they had, the boat speeding between them. That's because they were probably 1,600 feet long or more, and they wanted to get through them. And 210A13 states, floating agriculture should be reviewed with conflicts to water-dependent uses in areas utilized for moorage, recreational boating, etc. Again, we're out there every week in summer. County Code 210B1E states, consistent with mitigation, sequencing, agriculture uses and developments may be required to provide mitigation where necessary to offset significant adverse effects to normal public use of the waters. And there will be a significant impact, as we stated already. I can't get across the water without a lot of effort. And 210B1J states, to the maximum extent practicable, floating structures shall not substantially detract from aesthetic qualities, etc. And I've already stated this is not doing that, it's detracting. And 210B1K states, agricultural structures shall be placed in such a manner to be suitably sized and marked as to minimize the interference of navigation. Again, the 1,600 feet is going to interfere with my navigation. And there's no way to minimize that except not approve it. And Code 1509-050C2 says development does not impact the public health, safety, and welfare in the public interest. And this is definitely not in the public interest. It restricts the public interest to use it and only lets Taylor Shellfish use it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. All right, next are the Clarks. Kathy and, or excuse me, just Greg Clark is listed as wanting to say something. After Mr. Clark is Mark Herron. Swear in, Mr. Clark. Do you swear affirm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
Yes.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
My name is Greg Clark. I'm a professional engineer for over 45 years. And we bought 3 lots on Seamount Way, East Seamount Way, and we looked down on Oakland Bay, and it's beautiful. And the thought of this large, exceedingly large growing culture to be down on the water where I'm going to be looking down on this thing is just, I can't believe it. I am so upset too with the notification, the public notice for this particular project. I mean, this thing has been going on for, I don't know, 3-4 years, and I've yet to get a notice of this hearing without the neighbors. The lady down there, she walked and knocked on our door and told us about it, and I was like, what? And then there was some stuff in the Mason County Journal, certainly, but the public notice is just wrong. I mean, more people would be here. This room should have been at the city hall, so enough people could get in here and have and see this thing. Anyway, I was just the other point, the recreational marine use of the Oakland Bay. I mean, if you're a sailor and you're on a tack and you got this big 50-acre thing you got to tack around all the time, and if you're in a kayak, like you said, you've got to be paddling, it's way too big. I would really highly suggest that this thing be phased, where you can start out with a small amount of floating culture and see how it works and see the impacts. Have some ongoing requirements for testing and have those reviewed annually to see if they need to reduce the size of this thing or they're allowing it to increase, okay, maybe. But to start out with 30,000 bags, the biggest one in the state, just is, I think, crazy. Anyway, I'm very much opposed to it, at least in the way it's being brought forward at this point, and we definitely need some kind of monitoring to help see if this thing is impacting our beautiful bay. And visually, I don't know what to say.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, next is Mark and Kristen Harris. And is that Herinkx?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, sir, do you swear affirm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay, great.
My name is Mark Herrings. I'm a Mason County resident. My wife and I own a waterfront home on Oakland Bay. After years of hard work and a long search, we found this home and bought it because of the beautiful, mostly natural view of the bay. Now the view and the bay are being threatened. Fortunately, the Mason County Shoreline Master Program has some guide rails in place to sort out competing interests for the shoreline. Section 17.5070A3. Permitted uses in the shorelines of the state shall be designed and conducted in a manner to minimize, insofar as practical, any resultant damage to the ecology and the environment of the shoreline area, and any interference with the public's use of the water. Section 17.50140 places the burden of demonstrating on the county that the proposal has not interfered, blocked, or discouraged use of existing access. The county and Taylor have fallen well short of demonstrating that this criterion has been even remotely met. The inherent problem with this industrial commercial installation is its massive 50-acre size, the resultant blockade of Oakland Bay, and the takeover of public access by a private company. They didn't go big, they went massive. Although Taylor likes to emphasize the smaller footprint of the nets themselves, this is complete nonsense. What matters is the 50-acre footprint, all placed dead center in the middle of Oakland Bay, in the area of the deepest, most navigable water. I'm a longtime boater and sailor. I have a boat up here on the Sound right now. It's in Olympia. And I'm a member of Olympia Yacht Club. And Taylor's argument that you would want to navigate between the 1,800-foot moving lines is laughable, certainly to sailors. And I'd like to point out also, in that one exhibit, they're imposing, I believe it's a 6-mile-an-hour speed limit. That boat was probably doing 15, 20 down through those bags, and I can guarantee you Taylor's gonna have a big problem if you take a speedboat through those lines. Big problem. And nobody in their right mind would do it anyway because you'd get tangled up. This will effectively shut down the bay to boaters, usurping the best prime public anchoring area for private profit. Taylor already farms a huge portion of this bay, and their offer to offset this complete takeover by offering some pathetic mud access that they currently own is woefully inadequate. This proposal does not increase public access, and the idea that Taylor is offering upgrades to a boat ramp on a bay that they intend to block access to is pathetic. See this for what it is. It's a private, precedent-setting, industrial growing operation of massive size that does not in any way increase public access and destroys current access. Taylor must be denied. I'd also like to request that the examiner pay particular attention to Exhibit 24, which is a study on how views are impacted by aquaculture installations. Taylor's assertion that the impact will be minimal is incorrect and based on low viewing angles. I'm sure you saw this when you went out East Sunset Road earlier today. The properties sit quite a bit higher, considering that the majority of the homes surrounding the bay have viewing angles that are 30 to 60 feet above the water or more. The cone of view of the viewer will be completely dominated by the footprint of this industrial operation. There's a huge difference between the natural view and the view of a commercial plant. Taylor has not and cannot get around this problem and has not adequately addressed this aspect of the SMP. And also in this study, you will note that all of the examples are far smaller. The study that they're using for visual impact are far smaller in the area of about 10% of the size of this installation. A couple other points. The idea of job creation, I disagree with. 2 to 5 jobs. What's the future of Oakland Bay? What's the future of Shelton? How many jobs are provided by the surrounding properties? Waterfront homes or expensive homes, the construction of which, maintenance of which provides a lot of jobs. Not to mention people that live upland that enjoy the view of the bay. Please deny this request. Thank you.
All right. After Ms. Hendricks is Roger Wilson.
Roger already spoke.
Oh,
You spoke first.
Oh, that's right.
I'm
yeah.
already sworn. No, you're not.
Yeah, you swear affirm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
Yes.
Okay, and after Ms. Hendricks is Kevin Renzo then. Yeah. All right, go ahead.
I'm not going to read all of this because I'll just end up being redundant. I would like to say to the gentleman who is the consultant talking about how this will clean the water, no, that's not what it does, and the scale is the problem. One of the major problems that I see is the fact that we are talking about 50 acres of oysters. I did some math based on research of how many oysters can you put it in an acre, etc. We are talking about 75 million oysters, a single species. Anyway, so all of the math that has been thrown around that I have heard is really incorrect. And this would be a flat-out experiment because there is no site in the US of A, not just Washington, but all of the United States that has the ratio of oysters to this amount of water. For example, Humboldt Bay in California, that is 16,000 acres for the bay. For what is allowed that is not restricted because of pollution, dioxins created not just by Simpson Lumber, but by other companies as well for years and years and years. I mean, we are talking way back, 60s, 70s is when they started dumping crap in the water. At any rate, this has been historically a zip code where industries take advantage of the general populace. And this is number 2 for the entire state of Washington for cancer, all cancer occurrence per capita, number 2. And yet we are 20th in terms of population density. And I don't think that that is a coincidence at all. So now we are talking about further raping and pillaging the bay again. Anyway, I will try to stick to my remarks or I lose my mind. Let's see. Mason County is poised to prostitute Oakland Bay on the altar of greed. Why? By Taylor's admission, they will assign existing workers to this or only a few. The only entity Taylor Shellfish's plan benefits is Taylor Shellfish. Their plan will do the following. Destroy the view shed. Taylor claims a minimal percentage, the same supposed percentage if Da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa with a spider coming out of her nose. Diminished value for the residents around the bay, many of whom are retirees. Diminished tax base for Mason County. Diminished ability to navigate and enjoy the bay recreationally, especially sailboats with keels. Diminished habitat for salmon, orcas, and other wildlife. Destruction of the ecosystem. A single species introduced on this scale in a small bay will gobble species up. They will gobble up they were talking about the phytoplankton, which was very ironic because that is what the food chain is based on. And you noticed his demonstration where they put the bag of oysters and then, wow, the water is clear. Well, that's not necessarily good because a lot of species down the line, they depend on that. So you're talking about sucking out all of the nutrients for the other species that exist within the bay.
The centers are up to 5 minutes, so if you could
I'll
wrap it up.
Okay. Taylor is offering a strip of mud to offset our loss to be accessed via private property. This is ridiculous on its face. The other thing is the diminished tourist dollars. Taylor has the audacity to say that their industrial aquaculture will be a tourist spot. Would they risk that kind of liability? No. They're not going to give tours out there. It's ridiculous. Given options for vacationing, most will not want to look at an ugly industrial oyster farm or smell dead oysters either. Oh, and that brings me to the other point. Stink. The gear is not infallible. The plastic bags, they break off. Then the oysters wash up and they create a stench. And on the East Coast, this is lawsuit worthy. Anyway, I think that's about it. For the record, I am radically opposed.
Okay, so Mr. Renzo, and after Mr. Renzo is Nancy Wilmer.
Can I just ask before the next speaker, has
Yeah.
anybody given you any more comments that need to be entered as exhibits?
No, I mean, I don't enter exhibits that are fully read into the record, so that's fine.
Luke, did you put mine in?
Okay. All right, so Mr. Renzo, after Mr. Renzo is Ms. Wilmer. So, Mr. Renzo, let me start in. Do you swear affirm to tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay, great, go ahead.
I invite, I put in the chat up there a couple of videos. I invite somebody if they have the authority to play those while I give my little record here. And they should be submitted for the record. First, I'd like to mention the disappointment that I feel that I had to drive all the way down here from Vancouver, British Columbia to be here today. Exhibit 8 alone of the proposal is full of many inaccuracies, as were the PowerPoint given about the effect on mammals. I'm sorry, the exact the page I cannot remember. But the proposal states clearly on page 36 in regards to the whale population. Effects from the proposed, and I quote, the effects from the proposed project to the SRKW are expected to be minimal and negligible due to the infrequent use of the shallow areas. But later in the paragraph it says, while the proposed project overlaps with depths greater than 20 feet relative to the extreme low tide, it is still within relatively shallow area. My first video shows, I don't know if anybody can show it, but it shows whales in the bay. So that's proof of just recently whales in the bay. Even when I was down here last week, I did see other whales in the bay as well. Unfortunately, I didn't get a video of that one. I can't get a video every time for this. Yeah, there it is. Thank you so much. Yeah, if you just play that. This is just looking in of the whale population that does actually frequent the bay. So this is inaccurate. We obviously didn't get enough time to take a look at this proposal because it's been sped so fast in. But obviously we're going to appeal it when we get there. But this should have been appealed a long time ago. The second video, if you don't mind playing, thank you so much. I tried to share my screen, but I wasn't able to take over. You don't allow Canadians to take over. This is a video now of the float plane. This is an important video because the float plane actually flies past the fire that was there about a month ago, I believe, the brush fire. So you can actually see the float planes picking up the water to go put out the fire. I guess you guys won't be able to do that. Being a Canadian, I can tell you how tough forest fires are. So I want to know what these statements mean. They're inaccurate. I'll give Taylor the benefit of the doubt that these errors are something that you overlooked. But this needs to be examined further, at the very least before those bags are dragged to the center of the beautiful bay. Remind me never to allow my kids to go to graduate school down here. I was also looking at the differences between the proposal and what is currently in my province of British Columbia. We aren't talking apples to apples, I can tell you that. I spent a lot of time on Vancouver Island and outside of Denman Island as well. This is not the same. This is very small. You are making a mistake allowing this to happen. And I'm talking to everybody about this. It's not the same based on size, even the structure of the bags themselves. I've been teaching at a Canadian university, and I feel you all need a math lesson. Let's say that 50 residents are going to lose an average of $100,000 of their property value due to this floating garbage. I think that's conservative. That $5 million could be used to appeal this. And we'll go pretty far to do that when it's only $290. I think we could get a few $1,000 together. Plus that'll buy us 12 to 18 months to continue this fight. A necessary fight. And it'll allow us to investigate the stakeholders closer and follow the money. Personally, I'd like to give you an example of what you'll lose in the property surrounding the bay. when I first bought around the bay, Shelton was a little bit sketchy. I come from Vancouver, so, you know. I felt that the area's improved, however. And I think a lot of that has to do with property values and the money that we're getting from those property values, which you guys are trying to destroy. This town has a chance to be Seattle's little summer home vacation retirement community, but this will ruin all that. And I'm sure everybody agrees. Thank you.
Mr. Renzo?
Yes.
Question? Just a couple on your videos there, because
Yeah.
I imagine you want to get that in the record.
Yeah,
So
please.
when did you take the video of the whales?
The video of the whales was end of last summer.
Okay. And that was on the, where did you take it from? I mean, I know it was in the bay.
It was from my property.
Oh,
I
okay,
just
you-
happened to have my phone with me, and
I
I saw
see.
them jump in.
And where's your property on the bay?
It's on, you drove right past me today.
Oh, okay. Okay.
On
Sunset Road, okay, gotcha. All right, and, okay, so any objections over the two videos coming into the record? Okay, hearing none, those will be admitted as Exhibit 37. And Mrs. Hendricks asked that her written statement, I guess there was more in writing than she testified about. She wants to get that in the record. Any objections over that coming in as Exhibit 38? Do you need a copy, applicants, or?
We request a copy of them to review after the.
Okay, all right, so that's admitted as 38. Okay, great.
Mr. Examiner,
Yeah.
Bill Fierce submitted something that he also didn't completely read from, paraphrase, so I'd ask that be exhibit.
No, he did. He read the whole thing. Yeah, that's why I didn't. Yeah, I watched it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He went through every single one.
I apologize.
Every single citation. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's see. Where am I at now?
Nancy.
What was that?
I'm ready.
Oh, there you go. Okay, Ms. Wilmer. All right. After Ms. Wilmer is Mr. Wilmer. So let me start in.
I do, yeah.
Okay. That's WILLMER.
N.
Okay.
And
anyway.
just to sweeten everybody up a little bit.
Oh, there you go.
Well, I'm a retired nurse and educator.
I think we need some caffeine in there, probably.
I live on East Sunset Road, and before I start, I'm going to try to be really fast. This was in their display, in Taylor's display, but notice that they cut this part off, okay, just FYI. So this was the red, and this is almost red. It's yellow. Let's see. I have a lot of versions here. I'm trying to be really fast. Nancy Karkeek Wilner, my husband and I live on East Sunset Road. My family's enjoyed the waters of the Pacific Northwest since the 1800s. They left a legacy of scholarship at the UW, a park in Seattle, a museum, history of industry, and I'm just curious what legacy Taylor wants to leave. We love being able to play on the water, especially kayaking, stand-up paddleboarding in Oakland Bay. The grandchildren like Poppy to tow them on inner tubes behind the boat. We are against Taylor Shellfish further invading the public waters of Puget Sound. The proposed commercial aqua structure will benefit Taylor only, not the Mason County residents. So there's just 3 reasons that have already been covered, so I'll go really fast. It's too big. It's going to alter the bay's ecosystem from the benthos to the fish, to the whales, and to the eagles overhead. It will almost fill the bay side to side. They're very, very shallow, only 30 feet deep there. It'll be a barrier to all who live, work, and play in and on the bay, including the plains which scoop water. The commercial aqua structure will desecrate our peaceful water view. Please deny Taylor Shellfish this commercial lease for the health of Oakland Bay and the residents of the community. There are so many other options for this bay that will bring more into the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Lori Elder, and after her is Richard Christofferson. All right, so I guess Exhibit 38, I've just been given a map of the bay. Any objections over entry of Exhibit 38?
There should be 39.
39, okay, 39. There we go. Okay, let's see, and we've got, it's Ms. Elder, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm swearing in. Do you swear affirm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
And that's ELDER?
It is.
Okay, great, go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for listening. My husband and I have lived on Oakland Bay on Sunset Road for 28 years. In my mind, this project is a government takeaway from the residents, taxpayers, voters of Mason County to benefit one entity, Taylor Shellfish. It seems to be a loan of public property for private use. I urge you to deny this permit that hurts the public good in many ways. Taylor Shellfish can, it seems, do whatever they want in this area for as long as they want. I believe that 99-year reference was in the SEPA checklist from April, May. So that is a question I have, is how long is the lease? Seems like the county doesn't know, and Taylor didn't address that in their remarks, so we would like to know that for sure. I'm not aware of the conditions that the county has added to the permit, and if it requires monitoring the environmental impact in the future should this project be implemented. In addition to losing control of the environmental health of the bay, the public loses a beautiful natural waterway that is truly the jewel of Mason County. This permit essentially turns this wonderful, peaceful bay into an industrial site for private gain. That natural view of the water is lost seemingly forever if in fact it's a 99-year lease. And I was thinking, it's a little bit like being a little pregnant. You either have a pristine view of nature or you have a view that has a man-made structure on it. It's not really a little bit, it's one or the other. And the public loses unrestricted access to movement on the bay for recreational use. The size and scale of the project will eliminate forever, it seems, if it's a 99-year lease, to paddle, swim, sail, motor across the bay. I'm also unclear about the size of the project. I don't understand the 9 acres and the 50 acres. But if 50 acres is what it is, just to give you a visual, that's 38 football fields. That would be the size of the project in the middle of the bay. And I'm not even sure that there would be a navigable channel on both sides if it is that size when the tide is out. So if the county is managing natural resources on behalf of the citizens, residents, taxpayers, and voters of Mason County, I believe you have to deny this permit. And just a question, I don't have a printed version. Can I email it to you right now? Okay, thank you.
Printed version of what now?
Of my comments that I just made.
Okay, yeah.
I
mean,
was not able to print it, so.
I mean, as long as you've read the entire comments, we don't need it. It'll be part of the transcript.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's in the
Thank
record.
you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so like I said, next is Richard Christopher, and after that is Jean Gonzalez, I think. And let me say while he's coming up here, at 5, I think we'll, if we're not done, we'll continue to another day. At 4 o'clock, I'm going to assess whether we can finish by 5, and if not, I'm going to take the testimony of everyone who wants to be done with the hearing today and get out. And then I'm going to encourage that the continued hearing be as virtual as possible. I'll be attending virtually, and then that way people don't have to come again, but they'll do that option if somebody wants to be here in person. So that makes sense. I'll go over it at 4 o'clock. All right, thank you, sir. Okay, this is Mr. Christopherson, and that's CHRISTOPHERSON, that's right, sir?
Very good.
And let me swear in, do you swear affirm to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yeah, and you have good handwriting, that's why
Okay.
you do that, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, I will say that I'm going to reduce my talk down to about 10%.
Okay.
And that's probably repeating what people have already said also. But what really struck me about when I started thinking about the change and what Taylor wanted to do and so forth was the scope of it, how big it was. And it is, and Lori was just asking, she doesn't understand how big it is. But if you don't subtract all the water between the rows, which is what they do to get the 6 or 9 acres. It's a very big project. The perimeter of Taylor's oyster farm would be nearly a mile long. And if you're interested in how many square feet would be included in the base, it's right around 1,900,000 square feet. Just multiply the 1,800 foot cables with the width from row to row, and that's what you get. It's a big, ugly structure floating in a beautiful bay, and that's the theme that I want to deal with here. Taylor did not own, did their own visual assessment study. It's titled Aquaculture Siting Study Exhibit 24, and I'll quote what they concluded. They concluded that the proposed aquaculture will be visually evident, but not visually obtrusive. Not true. Something of this size made of aluminum and high-density polyethylene mesh does visually intrude. In fact, it would destroy the stunning vistas that have graced Oakland Bay for centuries. Oakland Bay is often incandescently beautiful. I like that. I thought that up. Floating oyster bags are not. There's no way to mitigate what would be lost if Taylor builds their industrial-size aquaculture machine. A lot of people have pointed out that the only people who are going to benefit by this are the stakeholders in Taylor Seafood, and I think that's correct. Do the right thing, save Oakland Bay for all the right reasons.
Okay, thank you, sir. And, Mr. Christopherson didn't read precisely his letter, so I guess any objections over his written letter is Exhibit 40. All right, hearing none, we'll get that in there too. All right. Okay, so Mr. Gonzalez, Gonzales, is that correct?
Yes,
all right,
that's
let me
correct.
swear you in. Do you swear affirm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay, great. And Janie Aiken is after Mr. Gonzalez. Okay, go ahead.
My name is Gene Gonzalez, and my wife and I own a house on State Route 3 on Oakland Bay. This development has gone this far without proper notice and consideration to those of us that live here. And only 2 of the residents around the entire bay received the proposal letter and a yellow postcard. This is very sad to us, of all of us that work hard and retired, purchase our dream homes, as many of you have. And we have to pay, my wife and I have to pay 27 more years to view 50 acres of this development. The lease is exceptionally long. I'm now hearing 10, but originally heard 99 years. If this has already been secretly passed, it should have only gone for a trial of 1 year to see what type of threat this would be to the marine life, environment, tourism, recreation, and the local residents. Please stop this commercial development.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Aiken, after Ms. Aiken is Melissa Kennedy. And is that A-I-K-E-N?
A-I-K-E-N.
Okay, do you swear firm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay, great.
So my family owns property in Oakland Bay. Taylor Shellfish states numerous times in Exhibit 22 that aquaculture is a preferred water-dependent use of the shorelines according to the Shoreline Management Act. Although this statement is accurate, aquaculture is only one of the preferred uses according to the shorelines in the SMA. The other preferred uses are single-family residence, ports, shoreline recreational uses, and other developments providing public access. Preferred uses are designated to recognize and protect statewide over local interests,
preserve the natural character of the shoreline, result in long-term over short-term benefit, increase public access to publicly owned shorelines, expand recreational shoreline opportunities for the public. This permit application does not protect statewide interest over local interests. Taylor Shellfish is a private commercial company using statewide waters for profit. In addition, where is the protection for shoreline recreational uses? The SMA recognizes that the interests of all the people shall be paramount in the management of shorelines of statewide significance. I request the hearing examiner to deny this permit, protect the shorelines for all the people.
Thank you, Ms. Aiken. So Melissa Kennedy is next, after her Peggy Peters, and Ms. Kennedy, is that Kennedy?
Correct, sir.
All right, you swear affirm tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
Absolutely.
All right.
First, I was hoping to get just a couple clarifications answered at the end. So we had statements that the facilities would be run 4 to 5 hours a day with generators running 4 to 5 hours a day. So I want to understand, is that just generators? Is that generators and boats? And we all know that sound travels across the water. So I love my kids' music, but 4 to 5 hours below the excessive decibel is intrusive. And so I'd like to hear exactly how much sound and what sounds beyond the generators we're going to hear, because sound travels over the water. In those 4.5 to 5 hours, 4 to 5 hours, they state that navigation, that those 30 feet allow us navigation, but while they're working in there, I would assume that whatever navigation, any person that would choose to navigate that would be off limits. So those are concerns about if you take 4 to 5 hours over our day and then you tell us we can navigate that, but now we can't navigate it because you're using it. That seems to be a conflict of information. The other piece I was hoping to have some clarity on was the statement was made that twice monthly they would send somebody out on their maintenance boat to look at the gear and rigging and to assess whether things needed to be replaced. I would assume that this is at the point at which any missing bags or those kind of things would be noted and replaced. So every 2 weeks we're going to look for bags, and then when they're gone, they're obviously on our shoreline. So what is the plan to clean up our shoreline? Because floating oyster bags are going to be littering our bay. It happens in Burley Lagoon, it happens in all the other places that Taylor has bags, and they don't get picked up in a regular basis. And so I have some concerns about the amount of debris I'm going to see on my beach, as twice monthly they're going to get checked. So I've had a home on Oakland Bay for more than 20 years, and my property sits smack dab in the middle of what I'm going to be looking at, 50 acres of bags. And my concern is, and what I want to speak to today, is what appears to be a lack of completeness and transparency in the documents. And I think we saw a piece of that today with the reluctance to even address the fact that this is the largest type of floating aquaculture in North America. We didn't even want it, I did not interpret Taylor to want to admit that. And so that is a concern, because my feeling is we are a huge experiment that is going to set a precedent for the rest of the nation. And it either is, I'm just concerned about the impacts, because nobody has done this before. Yeah, 3,000 bags and 30,000 bags, that's not comparable. In there, my other concern when we talk about transparency is just the visual thing has been brought up, but what I want to address is the fact that it's not just what I'm looking at, it's what I don't get to look at. I don't get the reflection of the trees off the water at sunset. I won't get the ripples and the glistening from the sunshine across the water, because what I get is bags, floating bags that are going to impede the waves. It also is going to just crush the reflections that we get. Taylor doesn't speak at all about light pollution in the evenings, except to state that the Coast Guard requires navigation lights. They don't address the amount of lumens that are needed, how many lights are needed, on how many of the rows, what the overall impact of that is going to be. What's going to happen is our bay is going to be lit up for lights. So now my 11-year-old with her telescope is going to be impacted at night by the lack of stars up there. What she sees today is not what she's going to see in 2 years when this thing is up and running. As we talk about the huge benefit of jobs to Mason County, my other concern is these aren't living wage jobs. These are people that if $18 to $28 an hour, raising a family of 4, they're still going to qualify for SNAP and free and reduced lunch. This is, as somebody said earlier, 5 or 6 jobs, and they get to put 30,000 bags of oyster and turn profit on that. Those two things are not in alignment. So an approval for Taylor's request is a statement that a multi-million-dollar company's profit margin is far more important than maintaining our natural resources. Please deny this request.
Okay, and then Cameron Phillips, maybe? That one I can't read quite.
My next?
Are you Cameron Phillips?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have I have a prop too I wanted to show.
Okay. And Mr. Phillips, is that Phillips? Is that
Yes, sir.
right? Okay, I'm sorry. And do you swear affirm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this
Yes,
proceeding?
I do.
Okay, great.
I'm in the medical field. Bought some property off the 2100 of Highway State 3 there, and have a pretty good view of the water where it's going to be directly impacted, it sounds like. Many have kind of gone over everything I thought I would hit too. So the main thing I see that it's going to be an impact that's not been addressed by Taylor is that there will be problems and impact with light and noise pollution, and probably it sounds like it's going to be the size that it is. There's going to have to be a lot more people managing out on the water, so then that's going to bring in issues with pollutants like diesel and gas on the water. There's quite a few people already using it this time of the year, so they deal with that. Then there's kind of a reprieve over the winter time. Well, it's going to be going 24/7, it sounds like. I'll keep it real short. I don't know if this is Taylor's or not, but these are what the bags used to look like. And I know there's other companies out there. And this is just on a day when it just happened to float up a couple days ago. There's going to be many more all the time. I would say I observed this probably now, since I've been up here for the 2 years, probably this is the 3rd time I've noticed it on the water and went and grabbed it. It doesn't have any kind of indication on whose it is. There are oysters in it. I'm going to go put it back out on the water. I just brought it here for a few hours just to show. This is the kind of debris that's probably going to happen. It's man-made. There's no way of getting around it. It's going to happen. You can have all kinds of managing practices. Because of us being man, it's going to happen. The other thing I just wanted to bring up, I have seen whales too. Last year, I think a lot more people saw them because they were here more. I heard they were here in April. Closer to or across with them in the marina. But anyway, as we get to the final end here, I don't want to have too much more to say, but I'm concerned. I'd like this to be denied. There could be some further research given to us. That'd be great at some point. But for this size of a project, I don't think it's adequate.
Okay, Mr. Phillips, and if you want, you can take a picture of that and send it to
okay, and I've sent some stuff to Luke. I guess I could just send it to an email to you. Okay.
All right, yeah, get in before the end of the hearing, yeah, okay. All right, so as I said, at 4 o'clock, I'm going to kind of take stock at where we're at, because I don't want you to have to stay here past 5. I'm just kind of curious, in this room, how many people didn't check off they wanted to testify, but want to testify still? I have 7 more people on the list. So we have 1, 2, just 2. Okay, so, well, I guess, yeah, I think we'll make it with the people here. Like I said, we have a bunch of people who want to testify remotely, and I know the applicant probably needs some time to respond to a lot of this. So, like I said, I think what we'll do is probably try to continue this till next Wednesday, and encourage virtual participation. In order to do that, I'll participate virtually. That way, you all don't have to come back twice. You can watch the rest of this from your computer. I think that's kind of the best way to handle this in terms of the inconvenience factor to you. So, would 1 o'clock next week work, Cal, for the staff to continue this once we're done today at 5?
Works for me, Mariah.
Yeah, so, and then you guys could hold it in here, so if any of you, you don't have a computer, or you just rather be there in person, you're free to come here, right, and watch it, but like I said, I'll be doing it virtually, and I expect most of you will be too, so, yeah, question back
How
there?
many people are on Zoom? I see that arrow, so there's more.
Yeah,
than
there's
one
like
screen.
29 or something, yeah,
Is
so,
there more than that, or is there
Yeah.
another screen?
Yes.
yeah, I don't know, total, Mariah,
So 28 currently, the most I think I saw was 36 or 39.
Okay, yeah, and so, yeah, I want to give priority to the people who showed up today, so that they can say their piece, and the people who are doing it at home, then, they'll be doing it next week then. Sir?
I probably just wasn't listening when you started. Can you tell us what happens now? What do you do with all of this stuff? Who looks at it? Who talks about it?
Oh, well, that's, once the record is closed, which will be next week, then, yeah, then I need to, get a transcript of all the testimony, go back, read all the letters, and then I just have to apply the shoreline criteria that I was talking about at the beginning of the hearing to determine whether or not it must be approved or not. So it's my decision, and that's appealable to the Washington State Shoreline Hearings Board, which is that board will appeal. That's how the process works. No, yeah, question back there.
It was very obvious to me that there was going to be a very large gathering. My question is, why wasn't a larger auditorium reserved, one that the PUD has one?
I don't know, maybe Ms. Rowan, maybe you can, I don't know, that's
This is almost deliberate.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
It wasn't big enough, it wasn't obvious. It wasn't
I mean, this
big
is the, the
And,
biggest regular county meeting
I
facility,
blame
I
what,
think.
the
Yeah,
Taylor?
yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, as I said, this is the biggest group I think we've had since the racetrack, and that's pretty much been it since 1997. So I don't know if staff was able to really anticipate that, it would go beyond, and I think we did fit everyone basically into the building. It's unfortunate it's split.
Yeah, that's why, we don't typically, we usually use this room, we've been Zoom for the last 3 years, we just went person, that's why we have the Zoom. We got Mason Web TV here to live stream it and ask that people that were not going to testify to leave the room for the people who were planning to testify, so it's nothing deliberate.
Yeah.
No, that's not the way to run a meeting.
Part of my question earlier was, what is the actual infrastructure going to look like? And under oath, you testified showing us 4 different pictures, at least 4 different renditions.
Okay, let's. We're still taking testimony.
Oh,
and
I
yeah,
thought we were done.
sorry. Yeah, sorry. I want to make sure that the people who are here and want to speak have a chance to do that today. So, yeah, everyone can get the fair turn. So let's see. So we'll go on until 5, and at that point, like I said, we'll continue it. So after Cameron Phillips was Arthur Parker, and after Mr. Parker is Patrick Patillo. Okay, Mr. Parker, do you swear affirm and tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this
I do.
proceeding? Okay, great, go ahead.
I would just like to concur with the previous comments made and testimony for against approval, and with the further point that I'm a regular boater year-round Oakland Bay, so the premise that nobody uses Oakland Bay is completely false. I'm a pretty good researcher. I did a ton of research on aquaculture farms worldwide. There are no 30,000 bag aquaculture farms anywhere. This thing is massive, and it's in a very small bay. If this does go forward, potentially limit this project to existing sizes with precedent, so that we know what we're dealing with. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Parker. And next are the Patillos, Patrick and Aaron. Mr. Patillo.
Skipped over Peggy Peters, her name was called, I think about 5 people. Yes, but she didn't get to go.
Oh, okay.
She tried to stand up and.
Okay, well, we'll let Ms. Peters go after the Patillos then. Is that, yeah, don't let me forget. Okay, Mr. Patillo, is that P-A-T-T-I-L-L-O?
Correct.
Okay, let me swear you, do you swear affirm and tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay, great, go ahead.
My education background is I have a bachelor degree in science with the University of Washington. in quantitative applications of fish population management. And I have 36 years of experience with the State of Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife in biology, in public process, and in negotiations. I've written plans, management plans between the state and the Puget Sound tribes. I've been a negotiator in the International Pacific Salmon Treaty with Canada for the United States, and I've been responsible for more than 10 years to the annual process for the public process for determining salmon fisheries throughout the waters of Washington and the ocean in Puget Sound, Columbia River. So I have a perspective then both in terms of public process and in the science. And there are some shortcomings here. But I have, for example, received, I guess everybody received, but I'm not sure about that, on July 31st. And I do want to say that I appreciate very much the dedicated public service of Mr. Viscusi. He has been very helpful in ensuring we have that information. But, for example, after July 31st, we were presented with quite a lot of information, both scientific information and information about the process, discussions between agencies and Taylor Shellfish and Mason County, for example. Well, I've provided you with 8 pages of comments just on the materials that I received over the last week. So that's kind of a microcosm of the challenge that it is for the public to fairly reasonably participate, meaningfully participate in this process. So I try to stuff that frustration, and then try to focus on the science because I love it. I've always thought it was the reason why I got into this business, that science would help resolve conflicts. It could be the basis for common ground. I appreciate the work that's been produced, the study, not so much the studies, I'll get to that, but the materials that I've enjoyed. For example, the Habitat Management Plan, the work that Confluence Environmental has done is really good. But it's not enough. It's not sufficient, in my view, to demonstrate that the consistency with the Shoreline Management Plan or the Shoreline Management Act for Washington. And it's not sufficient to give me confidence that there will be no negative effects. That's the conclusion that Taylor has, and I don't think it's substantiated by the evidence that's in the record. This kind of brings to mind a pretty famous quote that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Actually, that was Carl Sagan, I think, was most famous for that. Oh, I know that's a connection. This process seems a bit otherworldly. How's that? At times, I don't feel like I'm there. I'm not participating. It's a struggle to be, for me individually, meaningful, involved. And I think that's true with so many people here that I've talked to, that I'm involved with. They range from just the people with passion, opinions, and I really have not been able to engage much on the science. I like the Socratic approach to science. I like to provide an opinion and have that discussion with scientists and exchange our views, and perhaps there's a resolution, perhaps there's a misinterpretation. There's not been the time for that. And so it may be true, for example, that as was brought up today, that example that I'm the one that brought up the Hood Canal Bridge and its potential effects on steelhead, ESA listed steelhead. I think it should be treated seriously, not just because they're ESA listed. They need every break they can get. Think if you're a little fish like that and you're migrating downstream in effect, and you happen to be, it's documented, they swim in deep water, but they swim in the top 3 feet. That was quite apparent from what happened at the Hood Canal Bridge is still happening because they're spending millions and millions of dollars retrofitting that bridge so that they can have the smolts swim around the bridge. It is like this proposal. It is a large floating structure that in that much of the water, fish swimming along, they hit that, wait, where will we go now? And suddenly, there's a seal. And seals consume, like for salmon, they consume 25% of the outgoing migrating smolts for Chinook salmon. That's well documented. It's not studied like that for steelhead, but this is a case in so many ways that lack of evidence is driving this. Lack of the opportunity for us to exchange our views and have a constructive dialogue. So I challenge the process. I hope you will enjoy my comments. That's the third submission that I had, and so I probably got about 20 total, so forgive me. But hopefully it's interesting and entertaining, and I know that's not what I'm here for, entertain you, but please consider that. Consider, for example, reasonable and prudent alternatives. That's something that hasn't even been considered. What about a smaller project? What about a stepwise project with monitoring and starting small, going forward? That's what was recommended with the 1986 aquatic sighting study. That's old, but it wasn't it's still very relevant, and mostly it was written as a means of resolving conflicts over shellfish sighting, aquaculture sighting. It's still an applicable tool for managing this conflict for an outcome. Well, I'll wrap it up there, and thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, look at your submissions really closely. And Aaron Patillo, do you want to say anything before we get to Peggy Peters? Does Aaron Patillo? Okay.
Oh, I have my comments
Okay,
submitted.
that's fine. All right, Ms. Peters, come on up. And that's P-E-T-E-R-S, I take it, and let me swear you in there. Do you swear firm tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great.
At this time, I would basically like to speak from my heart. I have enjoyed Oakland Bay, my home there, a great deal. I am against the construction of this. I see the recreational use. I actually see it when I don't see it because my pup tells me when we have the boats going by and the people skiing and all the things that are happening. Plus Taylor's own boats themselves, which I have a little bit of concern. Even though I'm on Highway 3, I don't have the high banks. I have a lower bank, mid bank, but my neighbors have a very low bank, and the erosion is. I'm thinking that with this project, you're going to have a lot more boat traffic on the edges that may create some of the erosions that could happen. Another concern I have, of course, is the pollution, the plastic, the light, trash that is brought in. I see the wildlife on the shores. I see the birds nesting. I see migration. I have concern about that. I see the birds feeding in the little coves, and I enjoy this. I can tell you what I see and how I feel. One of the things I do know, and I have talked to the natural resources at Squaxin Island Tribe, is that they say that if the restrictions are ever lifted from Oakland Bay for fishing, that they would remove this. I have a hard time believing that a big corporation would have that much money placed into this kind of a built-in construction, that they're going to actually remove this, remove it because of fishing being opened. And so I think that's also something that would be important, that I know they have some kind of agreement going on with that. I enjoy the view at night. I see Mount Rainier. I have a different perspective than the other people across the shore, but I do not want to see this being constructed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, next is Eric Valley. After him is Brian Legenberg. Hello, Mr. Valley. Let me swear in. Do you swear firm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding? And that's V-A-L-L-E-Y?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm a Mason County resident, fourth generation Mason County resident. I live at Deer Creek. I've kayaked here, just to put that on the record as someone, as other people have said. You know, I use this. I've seen it used. Here's another opportunity to win friends and influence people. I'll just start with this. This is gross and it's disgusting, both the substance and the procedure. The substance is, who wants to put a 50-acre farm in the middle of that tiny little bay? And I'll get back to that because I have a couple of threads here that interweave. And what's disgusting about the procedure is how, and disgusting just, it's just a big mean word for distasteful. Chacun son goût in French, you know, to each his own taste. And what's harmful about the procedure is the lack of public input. And it seems like we're going straight and only on statutory criteria, and I understand that. But here's the thing. Who wants to do something like this? The only people who have spoken, and I like Bill Taylor. I know him socially. I see him over there at the Tumwater Valley Athletic Club when we swim in the pool. I don't like going against a person who's not quite a friend of mine, but someone I like and respect. And I've asked him about this privately, and he gave me a very politic answer, which was mostly me talking, which is something I can do. The only people who've, and here's the thing, credibility is always relevant, always. Credibility has many parts. The first part is perception, another part is bias, another part is veracity. The only people who have spoken in favor of this have a financial interest in it. Now, who wants to put now, and I learned today too, and I think it's right, 9 acres is 50 acres with gaps that in between it? Well, that changes things drastically. And that's disgusting because it's misleading. So, I thought they were first, but I think they were second. And of course, I'm using they, a plural pronoun, to indicate one person. The person who spoke for Sierra Pacific. What kind of people want to do this? The kind of people who own Sierra Pacific. Sierra Pacific occupies the Simpson Timber Company, the Reed family mill, which denies all of us all access to our downtown waterfront. All of it. Sierra Pacific is a private family-owned company, which is one of the 5 largest landowners in the United States of America. They don't have our public interest at stake. They employ some people. That mill that they bought from Simpson could and should be up on Johns Prairie. They don't need to be taking our waterfront. So the people who deny us our waterfront want to help Taylor deny us more of our waterfront. So they have no credibility. I've only got a few minutes, and 5 minutes is not a long time. You can barely introduce yourself in 5 minutes. But I just made, scribbly notes. And what they have, there's no consideration in the criteria, the statutory criteria that people have addressed. First off, foremost in my mind is the aesthetics. And that is one of the factors, and here's another point I wanted to make. I represented Mason County in Growth Management Act litigation when it was new. There are 13 goals in the Growth Management Act, and the Growth Management Act explicitly says these 13 goals conflict. I don't know whether the SMA says that, but I do know it lists different goals, and I do know that one of those goals, one of those favored uses is aquaculture. That favored use impedes, restricts, and does terrible things to all of the other uses. And as I say, addressing the hearings examiner, I don't know if that conflict is inherent, but I hope that it would be a statutory criteria on which to deny this, because the one favored use wreaks havoc on all the other uses. So there's been no consideration of sound, no consideration of light, no consideration of the effect that this vast footprint itself would have. There's also the fact, I was just watching this documentary on this buoy somewhere and about how it attracted the oarfish, and the one thing I learned is, in 6 months, you got algae growing out your ears on these cables. I haven't heard anything about that, and maybe it's in there. But so the footprint itself is huge, no consideration of sound or light. No consideration, as somebody else mentioned, of remedying the negative impacts. That's grounds for denial right there. Oh, they failed to say, oh, some of these bags are going to break away, they're going to end up on the beach. Again, other people have made this point. I doubt that this is a statutory criterion, but oh, and the guy after me is Brian Lagerberg, I think, and I think he's gone, and I think he submitted his comments in writing. Somebody's going to. Oh, I don't need to speak for somebody else. What I'm saying is, I doubt that this is a statutory criterion, but this, okay, I know, it was Brian who told me, because I missed a little bit of the early part of the meeting. There are no new jobs with this. As people have said, this benefits Taylor United. They're not going to create any new jobs. They're going to transfer people from another job, not living wage jobs. Basically, this is slavery. This is economic servitude. This is almost reverse of eminent domain and condemnation. And again, somebody else said this. This is taking and that's why I started, 4th generation Mason County resident. Oh, I'll finish here because I know I'm running out of time. I remember a few years ago, I sat at what I call Bayshore Point. There's a point you can almost walk across the water. And I looked towards Shelton, and I'm just in a marveling, in a wondrous state of mind. And I thought, wow, how long has all of this been here just like this? And I've read a little bit of native culture, and Oakland Bay, from Bayshore looking down towards Shelton. First off, Peter Puget missed it. Peter Puget missed Hammersley Inlet, and he missed Oakland Bay. So let's keep it the way it is, because it has been this way since there were plants and animals here. Since the animals were people and the people were animals. And that's what I'm saying. I'm going to say this, I wrote it, I thought I wouldn't say it. Have you no shame? Thank you.
Brian Lagenberg, after that, James.
Brian's my neighbor, I'm Kim Robinson. He had to leave, may I pitch it? I did give a statement, but may I speak?
You have something in writing from him, or?
I have
Right there.
something in writing.
Oh, okay.
It does have it.
Yeah, if you want to read his statement, that's fine.
Yeah, actually, I don't want to read a statement, may I make my own statement? Or are you still up to
Because
speak
you already
for
had
me?
your chance, yeah, I mean,
No,
I
I
need to
haven't
get.
had my chance.
Well, I thought you said you did speak already.
No, I
Oh,
would like
okay.
to speak
All right, well,
if
come
I
on up
could.
then, yeah.
So Peggy's my neighbor, I'm the
Okay.
one with the low
Okay, let me swear
shoreline.
you in though.
Okay.
You swear first, tell the truth, and nothing but the truth in this
Of
proceeding?
course.
And how do you say your last name?
Kim Robinson.
Okay, R-O-B-E-S-O-N?
I-S-O-N?
Okay, great.
Yes,
Go ahead.
so the Gonzaleses, thank you for being here. I'm in the Black House on Highway 3, the medical professional, I live by you. Mark, for those of you who said we don't recreationally use the bay, shame on you. You don't know that, we do. I paddleboarded across the bay last weekend and met Mark and his family and his grandkids. And I just want to say I'm extremely grateful for this community coming together, and what we're asking you to do today is please have the courage to look at the benefits realization of what's happening here. The benefit realization is benefiting Taylor, Shellfish, and it's not benefiting those of us who pay taxes. And so there was a woman who was extremely insightful earlier today who made a comment and said, I have a question at the end of this. How much of your production will go international? The reason why she asked that is because you don't pay any taxes at all on production that goes international. You pay taxes on what stays in the United States. So that's why that is key. So if you're a company like Taylor Shellfish that made $72 million in revenue in 2022, but they're not paying taxes such as sales tax, export tax, excise tax, business and occupational tax, property taxes. It's us, the taxpayers, that are subsidizing the operations and the permit fees, and the expenses are coming from the communities. So that's why I'm asking you to look at the benefit realization of who does this benefit? It does not benefit us that are paying higher taxes than it is for Taylor Shellfish. So I'll just reinforce that in general, the shellfish industry generates limited tax revenues that don't offset the considerable state expenditures and privatization of public waters. And we're here to fight against the privatization of public waters. Thank you.
And I think James Kissinger, is that right? Okay, or Ray Husing. Those are the last two I have on the list. No takers there? Okay, there were other people who are here who didn't sign up. Matt, why don't you come on up?
Hello.
Okay, what's your name for the record?
Angeline Elguero Mateo.
Oh, how do you spell your last name?
ELGUERO -MATEO.
Oh, great. Okay, do you swear affirm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding? Okay,
Yes, I
great.
do.
Go ahead, thank you.
So I wanted to first say one thing, and I wanted to say, like, do I look like the people in here? No. My mom has been working for Taylor Shellfish for a while now. I think it's the first one that I remember my dad walking us out. Like, so I have six siblings. 5 siblings. I'm one of those 6. And my dad, who is unfortunately undocumented and was not able to continue working for Taylor Shellfish, but my mom, who is a resident, does work for Taylor Shellfish, and I think because of the employment and the opportunities that my family has been given through Taylor Shellfish, as well as the lovely individual over there, my older sister, I've been able to grow and prosper in Mason County. And I think one thing that's really disappointing is to say that this is all coming from a side of privilege. I did not grow through that, and so going out and paddleboarding or kayaking, going on a boat, was never something I could do until the last 2 years through my sister and my friends. So growing up as a first-generation college student, the first one to be in college actually out of my 5 siblings. Now my 2 younger siblings are pursuing that. Taylor Shellfish has really given that employment, and like my sister said, she's the lead right now in the Cove. I actually had the opportunity to work this summer with Taylor, hopefully getting my first car, because I work those 4 to 5 hours out in the morning, early mornings. I don't mind them, but I'm personally a night owl. Because I want to be around my sister, because there's so many opportunities given through the income, not only like during the summer, maybe I'll come back next summer, we'll see, but like being able to buy a kayak, being able to have extra money so that my mom doesn't have to pay for gas when we go to work, pay for the Powerade. She's called the Power Woman out on work because she's always, and she's, by the way, almost 55 years old. I know someone that's 60 years old out digging on those beaches, on those beaches. I'm also, not the strongest person, I'm not the tallest person out there, but being able to work in an interracial and intergenerational environment is not something I could see myself doing at Fred Meyer like I did during COVID, because it just wasn't the environment. But Taylor Shellfish has given that environment and that opportunity while I've been here this summer. I currently go to Gonzaga University. I am a rising junior, and I've been, throughout my high school experience, I've been involved in a lot of clubs. I've been involved, and I was a lifeguard at the pool, so if you had your grandchildren there before COVID, I most likely taught them how to swim, or was one of them. And I just wanted to say that, again, this is all coming from a side of privilege from what I've seen today. And I want you to take into consideration that the people who are out there in those boats going by you, my family can't afford to live out there, so unfortunately there's that. But Taylor Shellfish has given us that opportunity to be with our community. Our crew, our clam crew is like 16 people, and it's a majority of Hispanic population. Not all, citizens, but residents. And I've been able to have that opportunity to have discussions in Spanish, be able to talk about my pursuits and what I want in this future, and then maybe be able to buy a property out by Sunset Road, and then also just be able to have those recreational pursuits that you guys are able to have, and then also just see the seals, see the birds, and then be able to take those photos. Actually, I take a lot of photos out there, of course, because it's 5 a.m., and stuff like that. And I share it on my Instagram. I even did a takeover for Gonzaga's Instagram about what I do and what I have been doing out there. And you know what people say? They're like, "Oh my God, that's so beautiful."
Yeah, we want it to stay beautiful.
Okay,
right.
let's, you're talking to me.
Take photos of the bags because they see that it's reflecting there. Oh, what's those bags? That's so cool. Or I'll take a photo of the seals, and they're like, "Oh, what's that?"
Okay, I think you're at your 5. So are you about done?
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyways, that's all I wanted to say.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. So now anybody else who didn't sign up, I'm going to go to the remotes then first. All right, Mariah, if you can help me on that. At this point, like I said, we're continuing till next Monday. We have another at 4:50. I want to wrap it up to deal with some procedural issues.
Wednesday.
Sorry, next Wednesday. Yeah, 1 o'clock. Next Wednesday, 1 o'clock. I'm talking to the people who are participating remotely. So those of you who can't come back next Wednesday at 1, maybe if you just raise the virtual hand at the bottom of your Zoom screen there, we'll try to get you in to speak today. So do you have any takers, Marissa? Or Mariah, sorry. Just one out there? Okay, let's get her on. And what's her name?
Anna Richardshagen.
Oh, okay.
Keep your hand raised if you wanted to.
Okay, so we got a couple takers there.
And if I asked you to unmute, go ahead.
Okay. So who do we have first, Mariah?
The name on here is MCKOP.
Okay, and you'll have to unmute yourself, MCKOP. Can you?
That's me.
There you go. Okay. Yeah. Do you swear, affirm, tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay. And what's your last name? Could you spell it for the record, please?
Last name is Kopaz. Kopacz.
Okay.
First
great.
name is Mary.
Okay. Great. Go ahead.
I've owned property on Shelton Bay since 1999. We bought that property with the expectation of having a nice retirement home. I live my property is located on Swindler's Cove Road, so it's not directly impacted by the visual nature of what's going on. But I want to say that this project is oversized for the community. It does not benefit Shelton, despite what the last speaker says. There's only a couple of jobs that are going to be added for this, and I don't see that that's a financial benefit for the community. It's a private taking of public resources that does not allow us to share in the bay. While all beaches are public in the state of Washington, the mitigation suggestion doesn't help us because we already have access to those tidelands. Might not be able to dig up their clams or oysters, but all beaches are public, so that doesn't help us in any way. The project as described is incompatible with the residential nature of the community. More than 3/4 of Oakland Bay is residential, and you're asking to put in a major industrial complex in the middle of a residential community. It's incompatible. As a former planning commissioner for the city of Newcastle, Washington, I can tell you that this is not an appropriate use of the resources for the community. The other thing I wanted to discuss, as the applicant's own consultant said, the size of this project will create an impact in the community. And one of the effects they stated was the decrease in velocity of the water, which increases sedimentation. I saw no evidence submitted by the applicant that referred to the impacts 10 years down the road of 30,000 oyster bags and the decrease of velocity of the water, what that means to the sedimentation, what that means to growth on the bottom of the bay, and how that affects any other aquaculture in there, any other sea life, any other plant life. And 10 years of water being blocked is going to cause shoreline erosion because it creates new currents. And what does that mean to the community when the shorelines change direction, because we've now got this massive industrial complex in the middle of our bay? Beyond all the aesthetics and the community uses, it's an inappropriate use of the space available, and it negatively impacts the community, and I am vociferously against the project as it's currently planned. That's it. Thank you.
All right, last name Devitt?
Okay, Mr. Devitt?
Yeah, and the last name is Barnett. Can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
We hear you.
Okay, good.
Let me see, Mr. Barnett.
My name's, yeah.
Yeah, you swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great, thank you.
My name's Devitt Barnett. I'm a tax lawyer with Eisenhower Carlson in Tacoma. My wife and I have owned a home on Sunset Road in Mason County for a little more than 33 years. We've seen a lot in those 33 years. Suffice it to say, we were there when the Simpson log booms were in place. They were horrendous, and we're glad to see that long gone years ago. But the main point I'd like to make today is really two observations and then a request. I understand the importance of not repeating what's been said. First of all, my observation is that for the first time in more than 30 years, we've actually seen orca enter the Oakland Bay area, and many of the neighbors have pictures of that. We saw them in 2022. We saw them in 2023. I'm going to suggest there's a reason for that. I'm not a marine biologist, but I can tell you it has something to do with water quality, food supply, lack of boat activity, lack of commercial activity. There's got to be a reason, and people need to pay attention to that. It's important. Second observation is a real simple one, but it has a complicated implication, and it has to do with the temperature of the water. I can't tell you precisely why, but Oakland Bay is warmer than the outer areas in Puget Sound when you go out Hammersley Inlet. If you go to Hope Island or the tip of Squaxin, the tip of Hartstein, the waters are colder. What's the importance of that? What it tells me is intuitively, the waters in Oakland Bay tend to probably move back and forth, and they heat up in the nicer months. I would say, on average, your temperatures are going to be somewhere 4 to maybe 6, 7 degrees warmer. So the lack of any flush, if you will, or taking that water out of the bay through Hammersley and out into Johnson's Point, Narrows Bridge, anything else is important. And I don't think any consideration has been given to that. Bottom line is, I think it raises an issue of the specter of fragility. It's a fragile bay. If that water is moving back and forth, then you can't look at the pictures we saw earlier today with all those wide expanses of water with floating rafts and say, gee, same. I think it's different. So what am I suggesting? You've got people on both sides of the equation. I would slow the application process down because of the important nature of the long-term effects of what this is going to mean. I would, frankly, if it's going to be approved, I would shrink the size of the proposed application to some reasonable level that can be agreed upon, and then require monitoring, reporting to appropriate agencies, and community disclosure so that we can continue to be involved in this. This should not, in my opinion, be a winner-takes-all situation. If there's a compromise, it should be shrink the footprint, slow it down, and get this right. We cannot afford to get it wrong again like the old log boom days. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And like I said, if you want to talk today, just make sure it's because you can't do it next Wednesday, because I'm going to try to get this wrapped up at 10 to 5, so people can get home for dinner. But all right, so we got, who's next, Mariah?
J.L. Gibbons.
Okay, Mr. Gibbons?
Yes.
There you go. All right, Mr. Gibbons, let me swear you in. Just raise your right hand. Do you swear firm to tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay, great. And Mariah, there's somebody waving their hand up there. Maybe you can figure out who that's been for a while. So. Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, okay, go ahead, Mr. Gibbons.
I am strongly supportive of Taylor Shellfish Oakland Bay Floating Oyster Project, a project I believe will benefit Mason County. I am the president and founder of Seattle Shellfish, a Mason County company currently employing 85 individuals, 62 full-time and 23 seasonal or part-time. In 2022, our average full-time salary, including bonuses, was over $60,000. That average does not include my salary or our CFO or our operation manager salaries. We also give our employees health and dental coverage and a matching retirement plan. Shellfish jobs are very important to a healthy Mason County economy, and they are good paying jobs. Taylor Shellfish was instrumental in helping me start my company 27 years ago. Much of what I've learned about geoduck farming, our primary focus, came with their help and guidance. Although they are our main competitor in geoduck farming, they are also customers, business partners, and like us, involved community members. And maybe most importantly, they are friends. With regards to character, Taylor's character, I can't say enough positives about them. Taylor Shellfish is not only the leader in shellfish farming, being the largest employer in farmed shellfish in the United States, they are also very involved in Puget Sound and its coastal communities. They are extremely strong advocates of clean water and a healthy ecosystem, also contributing time and resources to nonprofits, particularly those focused on our youth. While most of our employees work in our geoduck operation, we do employ 7 to 10 people in our oyster operation. We would like to grow this business. Taylor's floating oyster operation will help us do that. All of our 7 to 10 employees are Mason County residents, but they are not necessarily homeowners adjoining Oakland Bay. To grow our business, we need bigger seed. This project proposes to grow big seed for Taylor's needs and other growers as well. In short, approval of this project will grow the oyster business in Washington, provide more good paying jobs, strengthen the local economy, and be good for the environment. 2 final notes. I personally live on the water and have a shellfish farm in front of our home. Several years ago, our company did an analysis of whether having a shellfish farm in front of your home had any effect on your property's value. Assessed values showed no differences. My understanding is that the project will add more than just the 5 jobs at the site in Oakland Bay. It is growing seed, what Taylor's doing, and it will be used to expand other Washington shellfish farms. So it's not just 5 jobs we're talking about. Thank you very much.
Okay, so Mariah, you got the person that was waving her hand.
All right, yeah, it looks like Galaxy Note.
Okay.
I don't know your name.
All right, is she muted or?
No.
Okay, Miss Galaxy, no?
Hi.
There we go.
My name is Anna Richards-Hagen.
Okay, can you spell your last name for the record?
Richerzhagen.
Okay, and to raise your right hand, do you swear firm to tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay, great, go ahead.
I just want to tell you, I've been a resident of Shelton since 2000. I'm living on a fixed income, so I'm not somebody who's a privileged person, and I enjoy the area around the Oakland Bay. And I am distressed by the idea of having the oyster farm in the neighborhood. I don't feel like enough research has been done to accurately study all the long-term effects. of what might be the repercussions. And so I encourage you to evaluate the process and push for further study or deny it. And that's what I had to say.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we got there next, is that Mr. Epps, or
So
I
we
think?
have two more, Brad Mortensen.
Okay, Mr. Mortensen, raise your right hand, you swear affirm to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, please proceed.
Yes, sir.
And is that Mortensen? I can't read very well.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
you got it. So, as you see, my name's Brad Mortensen. I'm a resident and also the president of Bayshore Community here down at the end of Oakland Bay. I've owned property for a very short period of time, and my age is about as long as a lot of you all in the room have owned property on the water there. So I'd love to be a representative of the younger generation. I'm a father of two beautiful young girls that are 1 and 3 years old. We recreate on Oakland Bay almost every single day, even in the winter. We're not actually getting out and in the water. We're by it and absolutely enjoying it. I've led partnership growth opportunities for a number of multi-million-dollar technology companies and have had the opportunity to focus rhetoric, argumentation, and I know the position we're in here as like the general public. And as an individual, it's been extremely difficult to find information about this project, which has been disappointing for me. From the ability to look up things on the internet, for the ability for me to call, I have had extreme difficulty finding the other side of the argumentation. So I've really enjoyed being able to listen to both sides today and come in with an open mind. Through all this, I'm firmly against what's going on here for a number of different reasons. Property values, sure, that's a fantastic point, but again, proceeds to the individual. What I'm most concerned about is the privatization of public waters, which has been mentioned before. Growing up in Mason County and then spending 18 years of my life trying to figure out how to leave and never come back, I came back. I came back and I started a family here for the serenity of the area that we have and the sheer access to the public waters that we do have, whether you are on the water, whether you're not. I would love to see our public waters remain public. There's a couple other things that I absolutely love as well. I love capitalism, I love opportunity, and I love community. What I am seeing, what I am hearing is the main source of benefit is Taylor Shellfish. They've done a tremendous amount of work for our community and have hired many, many people. This 50-acre farm does not improve anything of what Taylor Shellfish has done in the past, other than the back pocket of which the company is leaning on. I'm not seeing the, the opportunity to overcome a number of different things that Taylor Shellfish is trying to say here. So I'm extremely excited to see what Taylor Shellfish has to say in the future, to see how this will benefit the community, because I'm simply not seeing it today. What I would like to see and what I would really, really like to emphasize is public waters remaining public, the ability for us to access the waters that we love and enjoy, and for us to continue to be the beautiful and serene community that we are, the one that I chose to come back to raise my family of two that I have. My wife and I enjoy the community and what it has to offer. We enjoy the opportunity that Shelton has to offer. I enjoy working from home here and working in an absolutely beautiful area. So let's keep the waters public. Let's look at what this community does have to offer, and let's make sure that opportunities like this that come across benefit the community, not just a singular entity. So what I'd encourage all of us to do, if this does go through, let's vote with our wallets, right? We understand how to do that. We understand how to communicate. We understand which restaurants and communities that Taylor Shellfish is selling into, and let's make sure we do vote with our wallets in ensuring that the community has a voice beyond what we have here. So thanks for the time. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing where this all goes, and I hope public waters remain public.
Next is Mr. Epps. There along. Mr. Epps, do you swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth in this proceeding?
I do, yes.
Okay, great.
Hi, like you said, my name is Derek Epps, and you spell that EPPS, so Echo Papa Papa Sierra. I live in rural Mason County as well on Harstein Island, and I still have DSL at my location. So my connection degrades, I may have to turn off the video to some degree, and that normally cures it. But I am, and then so please bear with me in case there are any issues. I can try to call in too, although it is kind of late, so I apologize. May not be time for calling in, I guess. Sorry. And I strongly agree and ask the hearing examiner to approve this project. I'm an employee. I have a day job. I work with Seattle Shellfish, and then I also have for 8 years. I've also had my own small shellfish farm too, which I'm in the process of trying to expand that through the Army Corps application through applications that are both to the Army Corps and ecology at the moment to include oysters and manila clams. After I'd done that, I was kind of discussing with my neighbors about the process that had gone through and what had been going on, and I found out several of them out of the 6 farmers in my small bay on the east side of Harstein Island, three of them had stopped farming oysters altogether. One is still farming oysters, and the 2 had failed, and the fourth one is the fourth one is actually doing some ecotourism as a part of their business now instead of farming oysters and only doing vanilla. So one of the biggest problems with them, and they had relayed to me during the process, was not to waste my money because there isn't enough seed, and the seed that you can get is too small to actually grow sustainably in the environment. So again, this is probably I'd like to reiterate kind of Jim's comments, echo those, as well as Ken Thompson's from PCSGA, and how important this is to the local economies, as well as just how important it is. Having seed supply is a critical factor to a lot of small farms that are on the verge of being sustainable and increasing jobs from that type of perspective as well too. That really hasn't been mentioned much here. So and I think that's pretty much everything. So
okay, thank you for your comments. Okay, so like I said, we're going to continue till next Wednesday, 1 o'clock. And Luke?
2 questions for you.
Yeah.
I had a comment from Brian Lagerberg. Should this be entered as an exhibit?
Did he ask it to be admitted, or?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Yeah. To any objections to entry of his letter? Okay, hearing none, that'll be Exhibit 41. Okay.
And then the second one is, since we're extending until next week, does the public comment period close, or is it also?
Yeah, I was going to talk about that. Yeah. Okay. So so it's you can submit written comments until next Wednesday at 1 o'clock. So it's okay if you already submitted written ones. You can submit some more. That's fine. But you only get to talk once. So make sure you're if you want to say something else, get your written comments in there because we got to close the hearing someday. So and hopefully that'll be next Wednesday. I think it will be. And just some questions for the applicant or some requested information. I mean, the scale of the project compared to other ones across the country, I think it is pretty pertinent if this is like the biggest thing anyone's ever done for this kind of aqua farming, because when you talk about all the studies that are done and all the intensive regulation, if those studies and regulation have all been directed at, smaller projects, as no one's ever done something this big, that's kind of that's a little bit of a red flag, and I think that at the least would justify some kind of monitoring, since this is such a unique situation. So, and if there are projects that are this big, I think that I and the audience would love to see pictures of what that looks like, because I agree with the audience. I'd really like to see what I appreciate the artist rendering that you did, but that's rendering. It would be nice to see what something actually looks like out there that's of a comparable scale to this, so that we get an idea of really what the aesthetic impacts are. And like I said, and if there's been nothing of this scale, then I'd love to hear from your biologist about whether all these studies are really applicable to something of this scale in relation to such a small bay and that kind of thing. I think that's a valid concern, and like I said, at the least would bring into play whether monitoring is appropriate, because I think monitoring is an appropriate mitigation measure when you're dealing with something of unknown impacts, which this could be because it's so large. So if you could address that, that would be really great by next Wednesday. So anyway, we'll see you in a week from today, I guess. Thank you all for sitting through this, and I look forward to next Wednesday. So Luke, let me give you this. We'll exchange emails about how to clean up the exhibit list. I'll have a transcript done. It'll show